Hello everyone, I'm the storyteller, and today I'll take you on a spooky story. But don't worry, it will be a gentle and relaxing journey before you drift off to sleep. If you're looking for a tale that's just mysterious enough and gentle enough to relax to, then you've come to the right place. Now, find yourself a comfortable space, close your eyes, and let the story begin. Story 1: The Night of the Lost Souls. I moved into a small house on the outskirts of Elmridge, Pennsylvania, after my mother passed away. She died in her sleep, peacefully, the same way she had always lived. The house was now mine alone, and although it was old, it still held the calmness I remembered from childhood. But I was wrong to think that old meant harmless. Everything started on the third night after I moved in. I woke up at 2 a.m., not from a nightmare, not from any loud noise. It was a soft knock, steady and patient, coming from the front door. I lay still for a moment, trying to convince myself I had imagined it. But then it came again. Knock, 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 3 times, spaced out like someone was waiting for me to respond. My house had no close neighbors, and no one knew I had moved back. I got up, my bare feet touching the cold wooden floor. I walked slowly through the dark hallway toward the front door. My heart pounded in my chest as I cracked it open, letting the dim light from the street lamp spill in. No one was there. Just the empty front yard and a thin mist curling around the wooden fence. I closed the door, but the moment I did, I heard a whisper. Very faint, like wind brushing past my ear, but I knew it wasn't the wind. The sound was my name. Elena? I spun around, staring down the hallway toward the kitchen. A chill touched the back of my neck. And then I saw her. A faint figure, standing silently in front of the family portrait hanging on the wall. Thin frame, silver hair, hunched shoulders I knew all too well. My grandmother. I thought I was dreaming. But no, I could smell her. The scent of mint tea and old fabric. She turned to look at me. Her eyes were empty, hollow, and her lips curled into a sorrowful, tight-lipped smile. No screaming, no crying. I just stood there, frozen. And then she vanished. Since then, I began waking up every night, exactly at 2 a.m. Each time the knocking returned, and every time I opened the door, the yard was empty. But what terrified me more was that the dead started to appear, one by one, inside the house. On Thursday night, I saw my father, who had died in a car accident in 2014, sitting at the dining table. He was flipping through a newspaper, sipping his usual cup of coffee. When I touched his shoulder, his body crumbled into ash, and I heard a chilling whisper. "You mustn't let them in. Elena, lock the door every night." I began chaining the door, stacking chairs against it, doing everything I could to keep whatever it was out. But the knocking continued, steady, patient, and each time a memory would return, playing like a distorted tape in my head. Familiar faces no longer human. I never told anyone until I met Kyle, a delivery man. He brought a package one rainy afternoon and stared at the house for a long time, eyes unsettled. "You live here?" he asked, his voice dropping. "Yes. Why?" I replied. He hesitated, then spoke in a hushed tone. "An old lady used to rent this place. She died a few years ago. But around here, people say if you stay in this house, you start dreaming of your dead loved ones. Always at 2 a.m. No one knows why. Some people left after just one night. Others were never seen again." I said nothing. I thanked him and closed the door. But that night, I didn't dare sleep. I curled up on the couch, like a child, clutching a blanket. The clock ticked to 1:59 a.m. I held my breath. 2 years. Knock, 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 3 knocks, not fast, not loud. But this time, they came from behind my bedroom door, not the front. I trembled. My feet moved slowly toward it. I didn't dare open it, but the knocking continued, as if the one on the other side knew I was standing there. And then, the door opened by itself. Beyond it was a room I had never seen before. Not any part of this house. A long, narrow hallway with a low ceiling and dim lighting, like from an old oil lamp. And at the far end was a line of people, all my dead relatives standing silently. But they weren't looking at me. They were looking past me. I turned around. Nothing. But when I looked back at the hallway, they had moved closer. Fast. Still silent. Still unblinking. I slammed the door shut, shoved a dresser in front of it, and turned on the lights. My whole body was shaking. Now, I no longer know who is alive and who is dead. Once I called my cousin Maya to ask about these strange dreams. She answered in a flat voice, "Elena, I died 3 years ago." The line went dead. When I called back, the number didn't exist. Tonight, I'm writing these words in my mother's old leather journal, my hand trembling. It's 1:58 a.m. The wind outside the window is howling my name. I don't know how much longer I'll survive here. But I need to find out what's truly happening. Because sometimes, I see myself standing outside the window. Hair a tangled mess, eyes vacant, and a twisted smile, like I've been dead for a very, very long time. I didn't leave the house the next day. Every corner, every window frame felt like it was watching me. There were no more knocks at 2 a.m. Instead, there were other sounds. A child giggling in the bathroom. The clink of silverware on a plate from the empty kitchen. And at exactly 3:17 a.m., I heard my own voice echoing from the basement, a place I hadn't stepped into since moving in. "Elena, did you forget something?" The voice chuckled softly. It wasn't loud, it wasn't urgent, but it was delighted, as if it knew something I didn't. I decided to go down to the basement the next morning when the sun was high and the birds outside made everything feel almost normal. I gripped a flashlight in one hand and an old knife I'd found in the kitchen drawer in the other. It still had dried blood on the blade, even after I'd scrubbed it all night. The basement door creaked loudly as I pushed it open. A musty stench hit me, mixed with the faint, sickly smell of something long dead. I lowered the flashlight down the steps and treaded carefully. Its dim beam swept across cardboard boxes, old furniture, and a large wooden wardrobe pressed against the wall. I didn't remember ever seeing that wardrobe before. I approached. My hand trembled as I grasped the tarnished brass handle. Inside, there were no clothes, no books, only an old photo album and a locked wooden box. I opened the album. My heart stopped. The photos were family snapshots. Me, my mother, my father, and a strange little girl. She appeared in most of the pictures. Big round eyes, long dark hair, always standing right beside me, holding my hand like a sister. But I didn't remember her. One photo chilled me to my bones. She and I were sitting together on a swing in the backyard of this very house, both of us staring straight into the camera. I was smiling, but her eyes were completely white, her mouth wide open in a silent scream, and her hand was gripping my wrist so tightly it looked bruised. Below the photo, in handwritten ink, Claire's last day, stood her arm. Claire? I tried to remember. That name, it wasn't in my memory. But when I closed my eyes, her face began to appear. Vague, fragmented, like pieces of memory shoved into my mind by a stranger's hand. I heard the creak of the swing, felt someone grab my hand in the night, and I heard the crying. Hoarse, desperate sobbing from the basement. On the nights I was still a child. You promised you wouldn't leave me, I gasped, eyes snapping open. The basement was still dark. But when I looked back at the wardrobe, the photo album was gone. Only the wooden box remained. I brought it upstairs to the bedroom, used the knife to pry open the lock. Inside was a small diary and a broken silver necklace. A folded piece of paper lay at the bottom, hastily scribbled in red ink. Do not read out loud. Do not look into mirrors after 2 a.m. I opened the diary. It was mine, but not my handwriting. The entries were scattered, frantic, filled with terror. One passage made my skin crawl. Claire won't leave. Every night she stands in front of the mirror and calls my name. She says if I keep forgetting her, she'll turn me into her. The mirror is a door. 2 a.m. is when it opens. I froze, almost threw the journal across the room. And then I looked up at the mirror in the bedroom. A faint light from outside reflected against the glass. I saw myself, sitting there, dazed, eyes wild. And behind me, a child stood silently, her hand resting on my shoulder. I didn't sleep after that. I removed the mirror from the room, covered every reflective surface with white cloths. But night still came, and at exactly 2 a.m. the knocking returned. This time not from the front door, not from the bedroom door, but from the bathroom window on the 2nd floor. I didn't go near it, but I saw the silhouette, hanging upside down from the roof, her face pressed against the glass, eyes wide and white, and a grin stretching from ear to ear. Claire. She wasn't outside anymore. She was inside me. Since that night, I began losing track of time, eating at midnight, sleeping during the day. Each time I glimpsed myself in the mirror, I saw myself doing things I couldn't remember. Knocking on my own door, whispering my own name in my sleep. And one night, in footage from a security camera, I saw myself hanging upside down from the roof. But when I played it again, there was no one there. I went to the old hospital in town, the one where I was born, the one where Claire had stayed. According to the diary's final pages, I met an elderly nurse named Mrs. Donahue, who froze the moment she saw me. You're Claire's sister? I don't have any siblings. Then why do you look just like her? I trembled and asked about Claire. She didn't say much, just handed me an old file, half-burned, notes scrawled by hand. Claire Walters, time of death, 2 a.m. Cardiac arrest due to asphyxiation, suspected family involvement, signed by Eleanor Walters. I dropped the file, my name, but I didn't remember any of it. I had never been told I had a sister, or a Claire, or anything like this in my life. But someone remembered, and that someone doesn't want me to forget. I don't remember the last time I looked into a mirror. Every reflective surface in my house had been covered with white cloth. I even taped the bathroom mirror and the car's rear-view mirror shut with black duct tape. But despite all my efforts, I still saw myself. And yet, it wasn't me. It was another version. Another Elena, one who lived inside memories that weren't mine. One who smiled with the knowing grin of someone who had learned every secret I tried to forget. I returned to the old hospital the next afternoon. The building was scheduled for demolition, fenced off with metal barriers and warning signs. But that didn't stop me. I slipped in through the back, where a broken section of the wall left just enough space to crawl through. The air inside was suffocatingly cold. The smell of ammonia, dried blood, and rotting paper stabbed straight up my nose. Empty rooms, peeling walls, rusted equipment. Yet strangely, I remembered every corner, even though I had never been here before, at least not in any memory I could trust. I walked to Pediatric Wardroom 3, the one listed in Claire's records. The wooden door was shut tight, but the moment my hand touched the handle, it swung open like someone had been waiting inside. A small room, pale green walls, a metal bed with torn curtains, and an old mirror leaned against the wall, wrapped in a dark wooden frame. I didn't want to get closer, but somehow my legs moved on their own. Sunlight slanted through the tiny window, landing directly on the mirror's surface. And I saw her. Claire stood inside the mirror, not pale, not frightening, just a normal girl. Long hair, a worn white dress, and eyes heavy with centuries of loneliness. But the strange thing was, she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at another Elena, one also standing in the mirror, directly across from her. And that Elena was smiling. I whipped around, panic rising. The room was empty, but in the mirror, that other Elena held Claire's hand. And Claire whispered something I couldn't hear. Then, as if a hand gripped my wrist with brute force, I was yanked toward the mirror. I wasn't looking into the mirror anymore. I was inside it. And I saw myself, standing outside, vacant-eyed, turning and walking away from the room. I pounded on the glass, screamed, but no sound came out. I was trapped, like an unwanted copy, replaced in the world I once called real. I woke up in my own home, but everything was wrong. The walls were green instead of gray. The staircase now led into the kitchen, and on the walls, there were no family photos, only distorted portraits, faces half like mine, half grotesque, with eyes clawed out and blood-stained smiles. I didn't remember living in this place, but the house recognized me as its owner. The landline rang. I hesitated for a long time before picking up. It's time to remember everything, Elena. You're the shadow, not the real one. The real one's gone. Then the sound of children laughing echoing through the receiver, stretching on and bleeding into every corner of the house like a spreading stain of blood on white tile. I began to repeat. Every morning, I woke up in a different room within the same house. Sometimes I awoke with my hands tied to the bed. Sometimes in a patient's gown, an IV still in my arm. Sometimes I opened my eyes on the bathroom floor, surrounded by shattered mirrors reflecting dozens of versions of me, each one crying, laughing, or staring hungrily at me like I was prey. I couldn't tell what was real anymore. No one answered when I called. There were no neighbors, no daylight, just a dim, unchanging glow, as if time had frozen inside this cursed house. I kept a journal, trying to hold on to whatever pieces of my mind remained. But every time I opened it the next day, the contents had changed, paragraphs I'd never written, as if someone else shared this body, documenting things I didn't remember. One entry I found recently read, "Tomorrow night is when the girl will cross over. If you don't let her in, she'll drag you out. And this time, there's no way back. Claire, I'm not sure if I forgot her, or if I never truly knew she existed. But she knows me. She's reclaiming what's missing. And the mirror is the final door. I try to destroy it. I brought the mirror home from the hospital, smashed it with a hammer, scattered the shards in the river. But each morning, it returned, standing perfectly intact in the middle of my living room. Clean, untouched. And every time I looked into it, Claire was closer. She was no longer a child. She stood nearly as tall as me now, her face half deformed, the left side human, the right side a void, no eye, no mouth, just a hollow darkness that pulled everything into it. And last night, at exactly 2 a.m., I heard the knock on the mirror again. Not the door, not the bedroom, the mirror. Claire was standing there, and for the first time, she wasn't alone. She stood among a long line of the dead, my grandmother, my father, my cousin Maya, and others I couldn't recognize. They all stared at me, not with anger, but with quiet anticipation. They wanted me to step through. And I knew if I did, no one would ever come back. Story 2. The ghost surgeon never left. I never believed in stories about haunted hospitals until I heard the bell myself. It happened on a Tuesday night, under a fine drizzle that felt like mist seeping into my spine. I'm Daniel Craig, not the spy, just a sound engineer working on a frequency survey project in the outskirts of Pennsylvania. That abandoned hospital, St. Augustine General Hospital, left to rot after a lawsuit in 1997 involving illegal surgeries, was on my list of buildings to inspect for vintage intercom systems. When I arrived, the hospital stood silent in the mist. Shattered glass windows reflecting the headlights from my old pickup truck. No guards, no warning tape. Just a decaying 3-story building, a corner of the roof caved in, and a brass bell dangling from the ceiling of the second-floor hallway. A strange sight, since bells like that were only used in old operating rooms and had long been phased out of modern hospitals. I entered through a side door with broken hinges, stepping over scattered files on the moldy tile floor. The air inside was so cold, my breath came out in thick white clouds. I checked the sound meter and turned on the directional mic. At first, only the wind moaning through cracked walls, until I heard the bell. Ding, dong. Each chime rang cold and steady. Not loud, but unmistakably clear. Like a school bell, but warped, longer, heavier, as if trying to awaken something, not merely signal the hour. I chased the sound, hurrying up to the second floor. The hallway was pitch black, but at the far end, a faint yellow glow spilled from operating room number 3. The light had the hue of an old filament bulb, utterly impossible, considering the power had been shut off for over 20 years. The door was slightly ajar. I pushed it gently. It creaked open with the groan of a dying man. Inside was a fully intact surgical room. Operating table, dusty machines, an ancient surgery lamp suspended above, and a man lying on the table. He was wearing a patient gown, skin pale, eyes glazed over like he was hypnotized. A heart monitor beeped, beep, beep, as if everything was still running normally. I opened my mouth to speak, but my throat was dry as sand. He turned his head toward me. "Are you the doctor? I don't remember why I'm here." I took a step back, frozen. Before I could say anything, the door behind me slammed shut. Bang! I rushed to it, but it was locked tight. The lights flickered violently. The man on the table began to seize. "No, don't! Please don't cut again. I turned around, no one there. But the surgical scalpel was floating midair, as if held by an invisible hand, slowly descending, then stopping right at his throat. No blood spilled, but a scream rang out, not from the patient, but from the wall beside me. I pressed my ear to it and heard moans, sobs, desperate pleas. Don't cut me again. I'm still awake. I can feel everything. Please. I stumbled backward and bumped into a medical cart. On it was a faded nameplate. Dr. Vincent Lomas, chief surgeon. I knew that name. He was the surgeon indicted in the 1997 scandal, accused of performing unauthorized surgeries on psychiatric patients. But no one ever found his body after the hospital closed. Rumors claimed he never left and continued his work. I tried the door again. Nothing. I pounded on it, screamed. Then the lights went out. The room was swallowed by darkness. And then a voice, right behind me, a whisper in my ear. The next surgery begins at midnight. I spun around. No one there. But my hand brushed against something soft and wet, like freshly cut human skin. I screamed and pounded wildly on the door, until it burst open. I stumbled out, slipping on the floor soaked in. Not water, blood. The hallway lights flickered on. Every single operating room along the corridor lit up. I stood, trembling, and looked down the hall. A line of patients in white gowns stood silently, waiting. They didn't move. Their eyes were wide open, fixed on me. But the thing that haunted me most was none of them had mouths. I ran. I didn't look back. I didn't stop. Reached my truck, locked the doors, and drove like hell. But since that night, every midnight, the bell rings again in my ears. I've changed houses, changed numbers, changed states, but I can't escape because I think I've been added to a list, the surgery list, and St. Augustine General Hospital never stopped operating. I haven't slept since that night, not because I wasn't tired, but because I was too afraid. Every time I closed my eyes, I could hear that bell again. Not loud, not urgent, just steady, patient, like the heartbeat of something still alive. The bell from St. Augustine General Hospital, even though I was now hundreds of miles away, still echoed through my dreams like a stubborn message. I moved to New Haven, Connecticut, staying in a small rented apartment on the 3rd floor, but it didn't take long for the signs to appear again. On the first morning in my new place, I found a yellow envelope shoved under the door. No return address, no postage stamp. Inside was an old yellowed sheet of paper typed on a typewriter. Next surgery, Daniel Craig time, 00:00. Undetermined operating room, number 3. Status, incomplete. I froze in place, heart pounding wildly. Below that, in red ink, a handwritten line. Follow-up is mandatory, no exceptions. I crumpled the paper, threw it in the toilet, and flushed. But that night, at exactly midnight, the bell rang again. Not in my ears, but from the ceiling above. I climbed up to the attic with a flashlight and a small knife, though I knew full well the knife was useless. Across the thick dust, there were footprints, bare ones, just a single pair, going in one direction, toward the darkest corner. And there, dangling from a rotted wooden beam, was a small brass bell, identical to the ones in the hospital hallway. It swayed gently as I approached, though there was no wind. I left the house that night and drove straight to the city library, desperate to find anything about St. Augustine General and Dr. Vincent Lomas. What I found chilled me to the core. The hospital had been shut down after more than 17 patients vanished without a trace in just 3 months. Most were homeless, mildly mentally ill, or simply without family. Some of them had never even appeared in official admission records. And when they disappeared, no one investigated. Because on paper, they had never existed. I found a staff photo taken in 1996. My breath caught in my throat when I recognized a familiar face. The man on the operating table that night. His name was Benjamin Clark, a former medical intern. But after he volunteered for an experimental neurosurgery under Dr. Lomas, he disappeared. I took a photo and emailed it to an old friend, Emma Weiss, an investigative journalist in Boston. She owed me a favor, and I knew if anyone had the guts to pursue this, it was Emma. 3 days later, she called me. "Daniel, are you sure you want to keep digging into this?" "I don't have a choice." There was silence for a few seconds. Then she said, "I found a leaked internal patient list from 1997, not the official one. This one's strange." "How strange?" "There are names that repeat. Same person, same birth date, same patient ID. But they appear multiple times, each in a different operating room. And your name is on it." I felt my blood run cold. "What?" "Daniel Craig, operating room number 3. You've been called in 3 times." 3, but I only went there once." "No?" "Daniel?" Emma whispered. "That name appeared even before you were born." I hung up, shaking uncontrollably. I don't remember how long I sat in the car. Only that when I looked up, the door was already wide open, and a thin patient file was resting on the passenger seat. The cover was faded, but the label read, "Special Case, Craig, Daniel, Recurring Loop." I opened it with trembling hands. Inside were brain scans, surgical reports with no signatures, and at the bottom, a black and white photo of me lying on an operating table. I stared at that photo for what felt like hours, trying to understand it. But the more I looked, the more I realized I wasn't the only one living this life. That there had been others. Other Daniel Craigs, each called, each operated on, each trying to escape. And every one of them had failed. I called Emma back, but she didn't answer. Her final message was just one line. "I found my name on the list, operating room number 2. I never heard from her again, and tonight, I know the bell will ring once more. But this time, it won't just ring in my ears. It rings from every speaker in the apartment. From the radio, even though it's unplugged, from the phone, even though it's powered off. It rings from things that shouldn't be able to make sound. And outside my door is a hospital stretcher with a photo of me lying on it. I didn't know how long I'd been standing in front of that hospital gurney. It sat neatly just outside my apartment door, its wheels slightly tilted, as if someone had pushed it there and vanished in an instant. Under the hallway light, I could clearly see the dried, blotchy stains of blood on the mattress. But what made my breath catch was the photograph pinned to the headboard. It was me, pale-faced, lying motionless with a breathing tube jammed deep into my throat. I looked around. No one in the hallway, no footsteps, no elevator sounds. My apartment was at the far end, no security cameras. I chose this place precisely to stay off the radar. But now I felt more watched than ever. I grabbed my phone, called the police. My hands were shaking so hard, it took me 3 tries to dial the number. 911, what's your emergency? There's There's a hospital stretcher in front of my apartment. There's blood. A photo. It's me in the photo. Please provide your address. I gave it. Silence. 1 second, too. Then the dispatcher asked, I'm sorry, but can you repeat your name? Daniel Craig. A few more seconds passed. Then her tone changed, now cautious, uneasy. Mr. Craig, the address you just gave, it's not in our system. That apartment has been unoccupied since 2003. No one's lived there since the fire. I felt the blood drain from my face. No, I live here. I rent it legally. I have a lease. Mr. Craig, you said apartment 309 in the Belmont complex, correct? Yes. Sir, the entire third floor was demolished after the fire. There's no unit 309 anymore. I froze. Looked around. The hallway lights began to flicker. No longer steady. No longer quiet. My phone began to distort. Static. Then a sharp dragging noise like a blade scraping across a metal table. A man's voice came through the line, deep and gravelly, as though echoing up from a basement. You haven't shown up yet. The surgery has waited over 10 years. This time, you won't escape. I hurled the phone to the floor. The screen went black. Not broken, but dead. I rushed inside, slammed the door, locked every bolt, and then the power went out. No lights, no wind, no sounds. Until I turned on my flashlight and saw the bedroom door wide open. I didn't remember leaving it open. I was sure I had shut and locked it before leaving. I stepped closer. From the darkness inside, a phone began to ring. A landline. I didn't own a landline. The ringing was slow, steady. I stepped in, flashlight aimed at the desk, where an old rotary phone sat silently. Its cord plugged into a wall with no outlet. I picked it up, breathing. Long, slow. Then a whisper. Have you been anesthetized yet? I didn't answer. The voice continued. We have to move quickly. The hospital staff will inspect the wing by sunrise. This surgery is special. I set the receiver down slowly, but just before I could pull my hand away, a clicking sound rang out, like a lock turning from the outside. I lunged toward the front door, but it was too late. The door was gone. In front of me now was a hospital hallway. No drywall ceiling, no wooden floorboards. I stood in the middle of the second floor at St. Augustine General, beneath flickering fluorescent lights, overwhelmed by the stench of chemicals and the metallic tang of blood. I spun around, looking for a way back, but behind me was a stark white wall. No trace of the apartment. No trace of anything familiar. I had been pulled in, not by hands, by memory. Pieces began to return, disjointed fragments. A hand gripping my wrist, the numbness spreading up my spine, the sound of a scalpel clinking against a metal tray, and my eyes still open as they made the first incision. I had never undergone surgery in my life, but my body remembered. I walked, barefoot, past an open operating room. Inside, Emma lay on the table. She opened her eyes, looked at me. Daniel? Her voice was raspy. They keep us here through memory. The more we remember, the harder it is to leave. I stepped back, but the door slammed shut behind me. From the ceiling speaker, Dr. Lomas's voice echoed. Welcome back, Daniel. We need to recheck the stitches. It seems last time you were still awake. I screamed, but my voice was swallowed by the chime. Ding dong, ding dong. And it all began again. Story 3. The vent is laughing. Don't answer when it calls your name. I moved into the old 2-story colonial on Sycamore Lane because it was quiet. That was the appeal. After the divorce and my mother's passing within the same suffocating 3 months, I craved silence more than company. I needed to feel space around me. Empty space. The kind that echoes when you drop your keys on the hardwood floor and makes you feel like you're the last man left on earth. The house had sat unsold for over a year before I found it. A pale structure with flaking white paint and shutters that creaked like rusted joints every time the wind picked up. The real estate agent told me the usual lines. Great bones, classic charm. Just needs a little TLC. She left out that no one had made it more than a few months living there. It didn't matter. I wasn't superstitious. Just tired. The first week passed without incident. I worked remotely from my home office, ordered in too much pizza, and rewatched old documentaries I barely remembered from college. The nights were colder than expected for early fall in Pennsylvania, and the heating system rattled like there was something alive inside it. But old houses groan. That's what they do. It was the second Thursday, sometime around 1:30 in the morning, when I first heard the laughter. Faint, childlike, echoing from somewhere below the floorboards. At first I didn't sit up. I lay still, eyes open in the dark, my ears straining. It didn't come again. I wrote it off as my mind replaying something I'd heard earlier on TV. Or a dream, maybe. One of those that bleeds into the moments just after waking, before your brain shakes loose from the fog. But the next night it happened again. And this time it wasn't faint. It started with a soft giggle. The kind that makes your spine twitch because it doesn't belong. I sat up alert, my heart thudding too hard for such a small sound. Then came another, and another. Like a child playing hide and seek in the ducks, I got up and followed the sound barefoot, pressing my ear to the wall just beside the hallway vent. The metal was cool against my skin, but I swear I could feel breath behind it. Something warm, something watching. "Who's there?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The laughter stopped. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next day, I checked every vent, every crawl space, even the locked basement that the previous owner had sealed with 3 thick padlocks. I hadn't tried opening it before. It just looked too heavy, too forgotten. The locks were so rusted, I had to saw through them with borrowed tools. The basement stairs creaked like bones breaking under pressure. It was mostly empty. Some old paint cans, a few rotting tarps, and a broken rocking horse pushed into the corner. The horse caught my attention. It was antique, with cracked white paint and a child's name, Emily, carved into the wooden base in shaky block letters. The carving had been burned into the wood, the edges still blackened. I should have turned around right then, should have sealed the basement and gone back to pretending it didn't exist. Instead, I ran my hand along the horse's mane, and that night the laughter came back louder. More voices joined in this time. Not just one child, but 3. Laughing, whispering, chanting. They were telling stories. She drowned in the bathtub. Her eyes rolled back. A man burned alive in the attic, screaming until his throat tore. A mother smothered her baby, then smiled and smiled and smiled. Each voice was delicate and sweet, like little girls playing a game. But the words were wrong. The words were all wrong. I stopped sleeping. I began locking the bedroom door, though I knew it wouldn't help. I stuffed towels into the vents and turned the heating off completely. Still, The voices came. They echoed through the pipes. They vibrated through the walls. I started recording them with my phone. But every morning, there was nothing on playback, just the hum of silence. By the third week, I started seeing her. It always began with movement, quick and low to the ground, like a dog running past the edge of my vision. But when I turned, there was nothing there. Then came the reflection. In the bathroom mirror, I saw her behind me. A little girl, maybe 7 or 8, with dark curls and a red ribbon around her neck. Her dress was soaked, water dripping from the hem onto the tile floor. She never blinked, just smiled with her lips parted enough to show dark gums and broken teeth. When I spun around, the room was empty. I stopped brushing my teeth at night. One morning, I found wet footprints on the upstairs landing. Tiny ones, barefoot, leading from the bathroom to a door I'd never noticed before. A narrow wooden door nestled between the guest bedroom and the linen closet. It was painted the same color as the wall, almost invisible unless you stood directly in front of it. There was no handle, no lock, just a small indentation where a keyhole should have been. I pressed my ear to it, and from the other side, I heard laughter. Not playful this time, mocking. Then a whisper, almost too soft to hear. "You found the door. Now she can find you." I stumbled back, heart hammering, bile burning in my throat. I stared at the door for a long time, waiting, hoping it wouldn't open. That night I heard knocking, soft at first, then louder, rhythmic, the kind of knocking that mimics a heartbeat, from inside the walls. I moved out the next day, packed a bag, drove to a motel off the interstate, and slept like the dead. But the motel room had vents too, and at 1:30 a.m., I woke up to the sound of a child laughing. Only this time, she knew my name. I didn't return to the house on Sycamore Lane for 3 days. I told myself I needed time to breathe, to reset. But the truth was I couldn't stop thinking about the door. That impossible door, with no knob and no frame. The one tucked between walls like it had grown there. I replayed the whisper in my mind every night at the motel. "You found the door. Now she can find you." Who was she? By the 4th night, the motel felt no safer than the house. The laughter returned, not distant like before. This time it came from the ancient AC unit bolted into the wall above the dresser. I sat on the bed and stared at it until my eyes burned. The fan was off, but the vent whirred, and in the soft hiss of spinning dust, I heard her voice again. "Don't leave me behind." I leapt up and unplugged the unit from the wall. The silence was immediate, absolute. But something in that quiet felt worse, like I'd muted her. And now she was watching, angry. That was the moment I realized I wouldn't escape her. Not with locked doors, not with miles of distance. She'd followed me, hitching a ride in the hum of the air, the vibration of metal, the quietest parts of sound where human words shouldn't live. That night, I dreamt of water, not drowning, not gasping, just floating in a deep black bathtub that stretched on forever. My limbs were numb. I saw a red ribbon drift past my eyes. Then a pair of hands, small pale hands, pressed against my face, forcing my head underwater. I woke up choking on nothing. The sheets were soaked with sweat, and the walls of the motel room dripped with condensation that hadn't been there when I fell asleep. The carpet squished under my feet when I stood, soaked through like someone had spilled a full tub in the middle of the night. And carved into the mirror with fingernails or something dull and desperate was a single word: listen. I left before dawn. I didn't go back to the house, not immediately. Instead, I drove an hour north to the county archives in New Lancaster, a bleak concrete building with flickering lights and a front desk clerk who looked like he hadn't spoken to another living person since the mid-90s. "I'm looking for property records," I said. "Sycamore Lane, number 137. He squinted. "That place again? What do you mean?" He slid a dusty binder across the desk. "People always come looking after they've stayed there a while, but most don't return." "Why not?" He didn't answer. Just turned and walked into the back room. The records were older than I expected. Yellowed, handwritten in places, with entire decades missing from the microfilm archives. But there was one name that repeated, again and again, like a glitch. Emily Wargrave. The first mention was from 1951, a family obituary. Emily was 7 when she drowned in the home's upstairs bathroom. The entry was brief, almost cold. Then came another in 1974. A young woman named Emily Wargrave had been admitted to the local asylum for severe hallucinations and violent behavior. She claimed a little girl lived in her vents. The record was marked relapse of prior family trauma. Then 1989. A fire, arson suspected. The homeowner's name? Emily Wargrave. Again. That name shouldn't have existed in 3 timelines. Not unless... I slammed the book shut. Someone was repeating? Or something? I returned to the house that afternoon, unable to explain why. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was obsession. Or maybe, just maybe, I felt like I owed her something. Like I'd opened the wrong door. And now I had to finish what had been started long before me. The house looked different in the daylight. Still gray, still peeling, but quieter. As if it were holding its breath, I stepped inside. The boards groaned, and a windless draft crept down the hallway, curling around my ankles like something alive. The upstairs was untouched. No more footprints, no more laughter, until I reached the door. The door that shouldn't have existed. Only now, it was open. Just a crack, but enough to see that behind it wasn't a closet or a wall cavity. It was a staircase, a descending spiral of cold stone, angling down into darkness. No lights, no switches, just a rope nailed into the side, fraying with age. I don't know why I followed it. Any sane person would have run, but I gripped the rope, ducked beneath the low frame, and descended. The air changed with every step. The smell hit first, mildew, copper, and something sweet that rotted beneath it all. The staircase ended in a stone room lit by a single exposed bulb swinging from a cord. There was furniture down there. A child's bed, a small vanity, toys, dolls, a rocking horse identical to the one in the basement. On the vanity sat a dusty cassette recorder. Next to it, a box of tapes labeled in black marker. Emily's laughter. Hands trembling, I picked up the recorder, inserted a tape, and pressed play. Static, then a child's voice. "He locked me here, said I was too loud, said I laughed too much, but the laughter never left. It just hid in the walls. It always hides in the walls." Another voice joined in. Lower, a man's voice, rough, slurred, angry. "If you don't stop laughing, I'll take your mouth and sew it shut." The tape popped, then silence. I dropped it. In that moment, I saw her again. In the corner of the room, not standing, not floating, crawling. limbs bent at impossible angles, dress soaked and dragging. Her face was wrong, too long, too stretched, and her smile went ear to ear, split with rot and something far beyond human sorrow. She didn't speak, she hissed, and every vent in the room began to whistle, then laugh, the sound coming from every direction like it lived in the air itself. I ran, back up the stairs, back through the impossible door. I slammed it shut and pressed my back against it, heart slamming against my ribs. There was no lock, no way to seal it. So I listened. For hours I sat on the floor outside that door, listening to her whisper my name, begging me to come back. And when I finally stood, I noticed something new carved into the wood. Your turn. I didn't sleep the night after I found the tapes. I couldn't. Not with the feeling that every breath I took, every movement I made was being registered by the house itself. Like it wasn't just the girl who was alive, but the walls, the vents, the very structure had learned how to listen. It had memorized me. At 3:11 a.m., I heard scratching behind the walls again. Not the quick scurry of mice. This was deliberate, a dragging, slow and steady, following me as I paced the hallway, trailing just behind the sheetrock like a finger carving a path. Every time I paused, it paused. When I moved, it moved again. There was no laughter now, no whispers, just that infernal, intimate scratching, and the hum of something pressing against the other side of reality, waiting for me to slip, just once, so it could step through. I turned every light on in the house, but in the hallway where the impossible door had appeared, the bulb flickered until it popped. I didn't replace it. Couldn't. The thought of standing on a ladder, facing that door again, my back exposed, my arms reaching upward. It felt like offering myself up, like inviting her. Instead, I called someone. Her name was Callie Mercer. She was an archivist in New Lancaster who'd helped me once during a writing project years back. She had an odd interest in off-the-books histories, fringe folklore, and the kind of stories that didn't make the papers but got passed around on cassette tapes and old radio shows. The kind of woman who kept salt in her purse and iron nails in her car's glove box, just in case. I didn't expect her to pick up at that hour, but she did. "Sycamore Lane?" she repeated, voice thick with sleep, but instantly alert. "Why in God's name would you be there?" "I need help," I said. "There's a door. It wasn't there before. And something, is behind it." A pause, then quietly. "You heard her, didn't you? You know about this?" "I know of it," Callie said. "The Wargrave girl. Her story isn't in the official records, but there were tapes, old ones, made by a former priest who did work on the property in the 60s. They said the house was wrong, that it retained energy. It's not just haunted, it's responsive. It mirrors its inhabitants. It remembers. Remembers what? Pain, grief, and especially fear. The more you feel it, the more it learns your patterns. The voice you're hearing, Emily, that's just the beginning. The house is preparing you." "For what?" But she didn't answer that. She only said, "I'm coming over." Callie arrived just after 7 a.m. She brought with her a leather satchel full of strange items: black candles, iron scissors, a small bronze mirror cracked straight through the center, and a dog-eared notebook with symbols I didn't recognize. She looked around the house like it was an open wound. "The air's wrong," she murmured. "Too thick. It's feeding on something. Me? Callie didn't answer. She walked straight upstairs. We stood before the door together. It hadn't moved, hadn't opened again. But something had changed. There were new carvings in the wood. Faint, shallow, like someone had scratched them with a fingernail. It wasn't words this time. It was faces. Small, distorted, childlike faces. Some smiling, some crying, some with gaping black circles where eyes should be. Dozens of them, all watching. Callie took a shaky breath and reached into her bag, pulling out a small jar of ash. "I'm sealing it," she said. "We'll need salt too. And silence. If you hear anything while I'm doing this, don't respond." I nodded. She began the ritual, whatever it was, with whispered phrases in a language I didn't know. She moved in a circle, pouring the ash, placing the mirror at the center of the door, muttering under her breath. But just as she lit the final candle, we heard it. A voice. Not a child's. It was deeper, male, dry and raspy, like someone choking on sand. "She doesn't want you here, Callie Mercer." We both froze. The candle in her hand flickered violently, then extinguished itself. "She never forgot what you did." Callie's face went pale. "You lied," the voice hissed. "You said you could save her." I turned to her. "What is it talking about?" But she wouldn't meet my eyes. The door shuddered violently. Not opened, just convulsed, as if something massive and furious had thrown itself against it from the other side. A muffled scream followed. Not one voice. Dozens, screaming in unison. High and shrill, and filled with an agony that vibrated the floor. "Get out," Callie whispered. "We have to get out now." We backed away, step by step, and just as we reached the stairs, the laughter returned. But it wasn't from the door. It was from the vent above the stairwell. A child's voice, giddy, delighted. "Found you." We spent the next night at Callie's place, an old duplex outside of New Lancaster, crammed with stacks of yellowed books and framed photographs of people I didn't recognize. She didn't sleep. Instead, she poured through notes, records, and sketches of the house's floor plans from different eras. "What happened to Emily?" I finally asked. "The real story." Callie hesitated. "She wasn't just a ghost," she said. "She was something else. A carrier of memory, of pain. She saw something she shouldn't have. Something that left an echo in her. When she died, that echo didn't fade. It multiplied. And the house, it began to collect them, all of them, every hurt, every scream, every whispered nightmare. The vents, the pipes, the walls, they became conduits. Conduits for what?" She looked up. "For what comes after the laughter stops." That night I dreamed again, but not of water. This time, I was in the house, except everything was reversed. The floor was the ceiling, the lights hung upward, and I walked along the hallway, like a fly stuck to a mirrored surface. The door was open again. Inside, I saw myself, kneeling, playing with a child whose face flickered in and out of focus like a broken television signal. Then she looked up. Not the child, me, and I smiled and said, in a voice not mine, "Your turn?" Story 4. The tunnel with no exit. I still don't know what made us do it. Maybe it was boredom. Maybe it was the kind of aimless curiosity only young adults could afford to have. Or maybe, deep down, something darker had called us there. Something none of us could name, but all of us felt. It started with a rumor. We were in Ashfield, a small town nestled against the foothills of West Virginia, where the forests stretched for miles and whispers traveled further than facts. It was late September. The nights had begun to carry a bite, and the leaves had just started curling into their autumn depths. I had come back from college for a long weekend just to unwind and reconnect with the group. There were 6 of us: me, Eric, Jenna, Milo, Kayla, and Daniel. Kayla was the one who brought it up. "There's a tunnel in the woods behind the Ashmore quarry," she said that night as we sat huddled around a weak bonfire, nursing beers and secrets. No one knows who built it or why. But people say once you're inside, you can't find your way out. You always end up back where you started. Jenna rolled her eyes, but even she leaned closer. "Like you walk in a straight line, but when you look up again, you're at the entrance?" I asked. Kayla nodded. "Or worse. Sometimes people vanish. The ones that came out said they heard others walking behind them. Talking, one guy said he saw his own shadow moving. The wrong way. I should have known better. But I was the one who said, 'Let's check it out.' It took less than 24 hours to make a plan. Eric borrowed his dad's old Suburban. We packed flashlights, snacks, even a portable lantern Kayla insisted on bringing. And we drove out toward Ashmore, just as the sun began to dip beneath the ridgeline. The forest swallowed the sky the deeper we went. And by the time we parked at the edge of the old quarry, night had fully settled. The entrance was exactly where Kayla said it would be. Tucked behind a wall of kudzu and stone, nearly invisible unless you were looking for it. A large rusted pipe, half swallowed by earth, opened up into a tunnel carved out of raw stone. It didn't look man-made so much as discovered. Eric climbed up first, shining his flashlight into the void. The beam barely pierced the blackness. "There's graffiti, but old stuff. Looks like no one's been here in years." Jenna hesitated. "I don't like this. It's colder than it should be." She was right. The moment we stepped into the mouth of the tunnel, it felt like we'd plunged into a refrigerator. I could see my breath hanging in the air, even though it had only been mid-60s outside. A smell clung to the damp walls, moss and mildew. Yes, but something else too. Something faintly metallic, rust or blood. We moved slowly, single file, the sound of our footsteps echoing far too loud. The tunnel was wide enough for us to walk 2 by 2 if we wanted to, but instinctively we spaced out. The further in we went, the less we spoke. No one said it aloud, but we all felt it. This was not just some abandoned construction. This place, it watched. About 20 minutes in, the tunnel curved sharply, and the walls shifted from stone to concrete. Newer, as if part of it had been renovated or covered up. Someone had tried to seal something away, or maybe protect something within. "I think we should go back," Daniel said quietly. He had been unusually silent since we entered. "This doesn't feel right, like we're being followed," Kayla interrupted. We froze. Eric swept his flashlight behind us. Nothing. No footsteps, no whisper. Only silence so thick it pressed against my ears. "I swear I heard something behind me," she muttered. Then Jenna screamed. It wasn't a loud scream, more like a sharp yelp of surprise. We turned and saw her pointing at the wall. Scribbled in faded red paint, nearly blended into the damp concrete, were the words, "There is no exit." "They knew," she whispered. "Whoever was here last, they knew." Suddenly, the tunnel opened up into a chamber. It wasn't big, maybe the size of a small living room, but the ceiling arched into darkness. In the center of the floor was a rusted drain, and above it, long iron hooks dangled from chains, swaying ever so slightly though there was no wind. Why would this be here? Milo asked, stepping carefully into the room. This isn't part of a tunnel. This is something else. Jenna took a picture with her phone. The flash lit up the space. And that's when we saw it. Another passage. Narrower, rougher. It hadn't been visible until the light struck it at just the right angle. It looked more like a crack in the rock than a hallway. None of us spoke. It was as if the air held us hostage. And then, footsteps. Clear, deliberate. Coming from the narrow passage. But no one came out. Just the sound of something or someone approaching slowly, then stopping. Run, Daniel whispered. But we didn't. We just stared, waiting for something to emerge. Nothing did. Eric pointed his light into the passage. Empty. We decided to keep going. I don't know why. Maybe it was fear driving us forward. Maybe we thought we could find another way out. Or maybe some part of us had already given up on leaving. The narrow passage led back into another section of the tunnel. Except now, the walls looked different again. Old bricks, crumbling mortar, like we'd stepped back in time. We passed old wooden beams rotting in place, and fragments of furniture, rusted bed frames, a child's broken toy, a door that led to nowhere. The smell grew worse. The lights started flickering, and then Kayla said, "Wait." We stopped. She was shining her flashlight at a symbol drawn on the wall. A spiral, etched deeply into the brick, almost vibrating beneath the light. "I've seen this before," she whispered. "Where?" She didn't answer, just backed away slowly. Then Milo gasped. He was staring down another hallway, the one ahead of us. That can't be right. We turned. At the far end of the hallway was a doorway. The same doorway we had passed at the beginning. Same cracked wood. Same crooked number 17 painted above it. Somehow, impossibly, we were back where we started. "No," I muttered. It's not possible. We've been walking for nearly an hour." But there it was. The exact same threshold. Eric walked up to it, touched the wood. "Same graffiti," he murmured. "Same scorch mark on the corner." "We're trapped," Jenna said. "No," Kayla said, her voice hollow. "We were invited." And then, from behind us, a whisper, clear as day. "Don't leave yet. You haven't met all of us." We spun around. No one there. Just the darkness. And somewhere in it, the sound of something crawling toward us. The sound was wet. That was the first thing I noticed. It didn't shuffle like shoes on stone or click like claws. It slid. A low, slithering scrape that echoed from the brick walls behind us. Too steady to be wind, too unnatural to be human. Eric raised his flashlight, hand trembling slightly. "Is someone—" "Shut up," Daniel hissed. "Just listen." We stood there, backs turned to the doorway we had supposedly reached again, eyes locked on the darkness behind us. The slithering stopped. Then came a different noise. A whisper. Not one voice, but several. Male, female, young, old, layered over each other like wind through a graveyard. "You don't belong here. You're not ready. Keep walking. Closer now." And then all at once, silence. No one moved. I could hear my own heartbeat thumping against my ribs, like it was trying to escape before I could. Then Kayla turned around and pointed back toward the doorway. The same one we'd seen when we first entered. But something had changed. There was a red light coming from beneath it. Faint, pulsing. as though something alive was breathing just on the other side. None of us wanted to open that door, but standing in the tunnel, listening to whatever waited behind us, felt worse. Eric reached it first. He looked back at us once, his face a mixture of defiance and barely contained fear, then grabbed the doorknob and pulled it open. Beyond the threshold was not the forest, not the entrance of the tunnel, not the cold air of night. It was a stairwell, old, wooden, with steps that creaked under the weight of time. The red glow came from lanterns affixed along the walls. Actual flame lanterns, like something out of a 19th century asylum. And below, at the bottom of the winding descent, a hallway stretched out, vanishing into flickering shadows. "I'm done," Jenna whispered. She backed away. "I'm not going down there. This was supposed to be a prank or some urban legend bullshit, not this." "Then go back the way we came," Eric said, not cruel but hollow. He didn't believe she'd find the entrance again. None of us did. She stood there for a moment. Then slowly, tears brimming in her eyes, she followed. We all did. Each step creaked like a warning, like the tunnel itself was begging us to turn around. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting something to start crawling after us. Long arms, gray skin, too many teeth. But the stairs remained empty. And that somehow felt worse. The hallway below was even stranger. It looked like an old hospital corridor. Tiled floor, yellowed walls, rusted gurneys pushed up against the side. A few overhead lights blinked on and off, though we couldn't see what powered them. Some of the rooms had doors ajar. Others had names carved into the wood. M. Ridley, June Whitlock, S. Grange. Milo stopped in front of one. "It says my name," he said, voice cracking. We crowded around him. Sure enough, on the door in front of us, etched not with paint or marker, but scratched into the wood like claw marks, was the name. Milo Bennett. We said nothing for a long time. Then Milo turned the knob. The room was empty. No furniture, no bed. Just a chair in the middle, and on the floor, a mirror, but it wasn't reflecting us. It showed the hallway behind us. Only in the reflection, we were all facing away from the mirror, walking backward. And someone else, someone tall and skeletal, its face wrapped in gauze, was standing directly behind us. We spun around. No one was there. But the sound of breathing, that wet, labored rasp, was now just inches from our necks. We ran, down the hallway, past more doors, past the broken intercoms that crackled to life just long enough to whisper names we didn't recognize. One door slammed shut behind us, even though no one touched it. The lights flickered wildly, then popped one by one in a chain of broken sparks. Finally, the hallway opened into another chamber, this one larger. A central column rose from the middle, with doors spaced evenly around it like spokes on a wheel. Each was labeled with a number. "Is this a—" Kayla began. "Testing chamber," Daniel finished. He pointed to the sign overhead. Faded and rust-covered, but legible. "Behavioral Observation Ward, Sublevel 3, and beneath it, Welcome Subjects." "We're being watched," I said. My throat was so dry, it hurt to talk. "All of this, it's part of something." Kayla walked over to one of the doors and peered through a small, fogged window. Then she recoiled. "There's someone in there." We all crowded close. Inside, a man stood against the far wall. Not moving, not blinking. His face looked off, too smooth, too pale. His eyes were shut, but his mouth was open as if frozen mid-scream. "I think that's a wax figure," Eric said. But even he didn't sound convinced. Then the figure twitched. Not a big movement, just enough to let us know it wasn't made of wax. We backed away. "I'm done," Daniel said. "I mean it. This is some kind of psychological torture maze. An old facility, something government maybe. We need to find a way out." Kayla was staring at the floor. "Then why is the dirt bleeding?" We looked down. Tiny rivulets of red were seeping from the cracks between the tiles. Slow, steady, almost like the floor itself had veins. One of the drops slid over my shoe. It was warm. We turned as a loud click echoed through the room. The door behind us, the one we came through, was closing. Eric lunged for it but was too late. It slammed shut with a metallic bang and the sound of a lock engaging. Jenna was shaking now. No windows, no doors that lead out, only the ones leading in. Then the lights cut out. In the pitch black, a low guttural voice whispered from every direction at once. "Now the test begins." We stood in the dark, unable to see even our hands in front of our faces. The air was so heavy, it felt like we were inhaling dust with every breath. It wasn't just the darkness that made my skin crawl. It was the silence that followed. The kind that didn't feel empty, but listening. The voice had vanished. The lights didn't flicker back on. And yet we knew we weren't alone anymore. Eric fumbled with his flashlight, muttering under his breath. The beam sputtered to life, cutting a narrow line through the black. But the light was weaker than before. Fuzzy, like it was pushing through a thick fog. "Check the others," he said. His voice strained. One by one, we tried our flashlights. All of them flickered like dying fireflies. Jenna's wouldn't turn on at all. Kayla's blinked a few times and then went completely dead. Only Milo's lantern gave a steady glow, and even that had turned a sickly amber hue. "What test?" Daniel finally said, breaking the silence. "Why would it say that? What the hell kind of place is this?" "It's not just a tunnel," Kayla whispered. "I think this whole place is something older, something pretending to be man-made." "What do you mean?" I asked. But before she could answer, there was a scraping sound from the far side of the room. Metal against tile, slow and deliberate. We all froze. Eric pointed his beam toward the noise. One of the numbered doors was opening. It wasn't dramatic, just a subtle shift, as if something on the other side had gently nudged it wide enough for a person to slip through. The air from the opening was colder than the rest of the room, and it carried a smell, ammonia, mold, and underneath, something sour and unmistakable. Rot. We waited, barely breathing, but nothing came through the doorway. Jenna was shaking. "I don't want to be in here anymore." No one disagreed. The door we had entered from, the one that had slammed shut, was still sealed. No handle, no lock, just a flat surface now, smooth and solid, like it had never been a door to begin with. "So we go through that one," Milo said, nodding at the open door. "Unless someone else has a better idea." We didn't. As we passed through the new doorway, I noticed something carved into the top of the frame. It looked like a tally mark, but done in blood. Fresh, wet. The drip hadn't even dried yet. Someone, or something, had just marked this door. The hallway beyond was narrower than the last one. The walls were rough stone again, but this time they bled together with something organic. Veins. You could see them, running just beneath the surface like something alive was pulsing through the tunnel skin. I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. I could tell by the way Jenna kept glancing sideways, or how Kayla muttered prayers under her breath, that they saw it too. After a while, the path split. One tunnel sloped downward into darkness so absolute it swallowed our flashlight beams. The other rose slightly, and at the end, there was a faint green light, like an exit sign, but blinking, erratic. "This feels like a trap," Daniel said. "Both do," Eric replied. "Kayla moved first. If this is a test, then they're watching how we decide. That means maybe the trick is not to split up." But it was already too late. Jenna had started walking up toward the green light, fast, almost like she was pulled. She didn't respond when we called her name. "Jenna," I shouted again, running after her. But as soon as I passed the split in the tunnel, a wall slammed down behind me. Smooth stone, right out of nowhere. No cracks, no hinges, just sealed. I pounded on it, calling for the others. I could barely hear them on the other side, muffled and panicked. Jenna had stopped ahead of me. She turned around slowly, eyes wide. "Did you hear that?" she asked. "What?" Her lips trembled. My mom's voice. She was calling me from inside the light. The glow ahead flickered again. I looked past her, and then I saw it. The light wasn't coming from a sign. It was coming from a person. Or, at least, what had once been one. She stood at the end of the hallway, barefoot and thin, her limbs too long, fingers twitching. Her eyes glowed green, not reflected, not from light, emitted it. And her face was Jenna's, not similar, not close. It was an exact match, same eyes, same freckle under her lip, same hair, though damp and stringy and slicked with something black. Jenna made a choking noise in her throat and stumbled backward. No, that's not me, that's not me." The thing at the end of the hallway smiled, not in greeting, in hunger. I grabbed Jenna's arm and yanked her back. She was frozen, tears streaming down her face. The hallway behind us was gone now, swallowed in a darkness too thick to be natural. No wall, no floor, just void. The other Jenna opened her mouth, and out poured the same whispering voices we had heard earlier. "Which one of you is the real one? You left her behind. You brought her down here." I looked at the girl next to me. She was crying, shaking, but real, flesh and blood. I could feel her heartbeat against my hand. I turned back to the glowing figure, and it was gone. The light vanished like it had never been there. So did the void behind us. The tunnel reappeared, clean, silent. Then a sound, like stone scraping, echoed again. The wall behind us opened. Daniel was on the other side, eyes wide. "What happened? Are you okay?" I nodded barely. We moved quickly, back to the others. None of us wanted to speak. None of us could explain what we saw. But something had changed. Jenna wouldn't talk. Not even when Kayla hugged her. Not when Milo tried to make a joke. And when we turned to keep going. Only 5 shadows stretched across the wall. There were still 6 of us, but only 5 shadows, and one of them was missing its head. Chapter 4. The room that watches. None of us spoke about the shadow. We all saw it. There was no way to unsee it. 6 of us stood beneath the tunnel's warped ceiling, but the wall beside us told a different truth. Only 5 silhouettes stretched from our feet across the wall's surface, and one of them ended abruptly where a head should have been. It wasn't a trick of the light. It wasn't our minds playing games. The shadow moved when we did. It followed our pace, mirrored our turns, a headless version of one of us. We just didn't know who. Kayla was the first to break the silence. "Keep going," she whispered. "Don't look at the wall again." So we didn't. We walked. The corridor seemed to shift with every few steps. The floor would slope ever so slightly to the left, then subtly rise without warning. The walls grew tighter, then wider again, like lungs breathing around us. Sometimes, I thought I heard dripping, but when I looked for the source, there was nothing, just the soft tap, echoing beyond our vision. Rhythmic like a leaky faucet, or heartbeat. We came to a fork again. This time, there were 3 paths. Left led to a spiral staircase, descending deep into what looked like black water. The middle hall pulsed with a low red light, flickering like a heartbeat. And to the right, an unassuming wooden door stood alone, marked with peeling white paint. There was a plaque above it. It read, "Observation Room, Staff Only." Daniel exhaled shakily. "Well, we're not staff." "We're not supposed to be here at all," Eric muttered. "That didn't stop anything so far." Milo stepped forward. "Observation room. Maybe there's a way to see where we've been. Or where we are. Or what's following us," Kayla added softly. Without waiting, Milo turned the knob. The door creaked open. Dust fell from the frame like it hadn't moved in decades. We stepped inside. It was cleaner than expected. The room was long and narrow, like a hallway turned sideways. One wall was lined with thick one-way glass panes, the kind you'd see in police interrogation rooms. Opposite the glass were old metal chairs bolted to the floor, each with restraints hanging limply from the sides, and above them, an array of rusted monitors, screens dark but humming quietly, as if they were waiting to come to life. As we stood there, the door clicked shut behind us. Jenna turned instantly. It locked. Of course it did. Kayla moved to one of the monitors, brushing dust off the control panel beneath it. "No power," she said, "but I swear it's humming." Eric crouched beside a small hatch on the far wall. "Looks like a fuse box." Before he could touch it, the screen above Milo lit up. Static, then slowly, an image. It was us, inside the tunnel, from above, as if a camera had been mounted in the ceiling. We watched ourselves walking, turning, pausing at the fork. Then the footage looped again, and again. "Where's the camera?" I whispered. We all turned and looked at the ceiling. Nothing. Just damp rock and the occasional cobweb. Another monitor crackled to life. This time, a room, a cell, cracked tile floors, rusted bed frame, and in the middle, something sitting still. It looked like a person. Back turned, shoulders hunched, breathing, slow, shallow movements. Then the figure lifted its head and my stomach dropped. It was Jenna, not the one standing with us, the one on the monitor. Same hoodie, same ponytail, same terrified eyes. Except this version was mouthing something over and over. "I never left. I never left. I never left," Jenna screamed. The screen cut to black. The monitor beside it switched on. A hallway this time. Familiar. The one with the red lights. The path we didn't take. Kayla gasped. "Wait." There was a figure standing there too. It was Eric, but he was alone, holding his flashlight like a weapon, back against the wall. His mouth opened, he shouted something, then ran out of frame. But here, Eric stood beside us, white-knuckling the chair arm. "What the hell is this?" he barked. "What are we seeing?" Then the screen behind him turned on. A new room. This time, it was the observation room, the one we were standing in now. Except we weren't in it. It was empty, completely. No chairs, no monitors, no people. Just a single item in the center of the floor. A mirror propped upright. And in that mirror, something moved. But not us. It looked like a tall, gaunt version of me. The hair was mine, the clothes, but the face was stretched, grinning. Its eyes were dark pits. It raised one hand and slowly placed a single finger on the glass. The lights in our room surged. One by one, the monitors exploded, glass shattering in showers of sparks. We ducked screaming, Milo throwing his jacket over Kayla as pieces rained down. Then silence, utter, complete silence, until, click, the door unlocked. Jenna didn't wait. She yanked it open and ran. We all followed. Back in the tunnel, the red light was gone. The staircase to the left was now sealed by a grate we didn't remember seeing. Only a single hallway remained, one we hadn't noticed before. Carved above the archway, "Continue observation." We hesitated, then walked forward. The hallway was narrower than before, the air heavier. I felt something cold run along the back of my neck, like a whisper too close to my skin. At one point, the walls grew so tight we had to walk sideways, shoulders scraping the sides. Then we reached it. Another door. Unmarked, we opened it, breath caught in our throats. Inside was a bedroom, clean, warm, carpeted, a single bed in the corner, a lamp on a nightstand, a bookshelf, a dresser, and a small television with an old VHS player beneath it. The TV was on, buzzing softly, a tape already playing. On screen, footage of us walking into the tunnel, then the descent, the stairwell, the first fork, everything. Jenna backed away. "No one's recording us." Kayla pointed at the bookshelf. "Those aren't books." She was right. They were tapes, dozens of them, each one labeled by name. Eric 1, Milo 2, Kayla 3, Daniel 1, Jenna 5, and then I found mine. Me. 7 tapes. I picked it up. My hand shook. There was something scrawled in permanent marker on the back. "You still haven't made the right choice." I turned to the others, and then, without warning, the television flickered. We were all on screen again. Only this time, we weren't moving. We were asleep, each of us, lying in beds identical to the one in this room, motionless, breathing. Except for one. One of us was missing from the footage. And when I counted, I realized it was me. Story 5. Cats see what you don't. I had never really believed in ghosts. Maybe that sounds naive coming from a woman living alone in a century-old house tucked between two forested hills in rural Washington. But it's the truth. Ghost stories were things you told around campfires or watched on late-night cable. I paid rent, fed my cats, and kept the lights on. There wasn't room in my life for superstition. That changed in October. The air had begun to cool, and a heavy, constant mist hung over the trees like a veil. That was when I noticed something was off. Not in any obvious way, not at first. It started with the cats. I have two. Milo, a thick gray Maine Coon with a regal attitude, and Miso, a skittish orange tabby I adopted on a whim from a shelter downtown. They were polar opposites. Milo, confident and aloof. Miso, anxious and wide-eyed. But they'd always coexisted in harmony. Curling beside me on the couch, or chasing moths on the windowsill. Until that month. It began with the staring. At first it was Milo. He would sit rigid on the hallway floor, just past the kitchen. His head tilted ever so slightly upward. Eyes locked on the empty corner, where the two walls met. I assumed it was a spider or a fly. I even got a broom to knock it down. But there was nothing. No webs, no insects. Just chipped white paint and a faint yellow stain that had always been there. Then Miso joined him. One night, I was brushing my teeth when I noticed both cats outside the bathroom door, unmoving, fixated on a dark spot on the ceiling above my head. When I looked up, I expected to see a bug, maybe a leak, but there was nothing. Just a patch of discolored plaster that had always gone unnoticed. The cats wouldn't look away. Their bodies were taut, fur slightly raised, tails flicking anxiously side to side. Milo growled, low, guttural, and Miso let out a strange, almost choking hiss before sprinting down the hall. Milo followed. I stood there, toothbrush in hand, heart thudding. It was probably nothing. I told myself that over and over. Cats were weird, but that night I couldn't sleep. They didn't come into bed like usual. I heard them pacing. Occasionally, a yowl or thump would echo from somewhere in the house. I checked the doors, the windows. Everything was locked. But still, I felt it. Something wasn't right. The next day, I worked from home, as usual. I'm a freelance editor. It's lonely work, but peaceful. My house sits at the edge of a forgotten road that winds through pine trees and broken mailboxes. There's a neighbor a quarter-mile west, a woman named Dorothy who breeds show dogs. But we rarely talk beyond the occasional wave when taking out the trash. That day, I watched as Milo sat in the living room and stared at the space beneath the coffee table. He didn't move for nearly 2 hours. When I bent down to see what he was looking at, I felt the cold, not a draft, not something explainable. It was an unnatural cold, like something had sucked all the warmth from the air in just that one tiny area. The hair on my arms rose. I waved my hand through the space. Nothing. But Milo growled again, deeper this time. "Okay, buddy," I whispered, backing away. "Let's go. Come here." He didn't follow. That night, the scratching began. It was faint, barely audible, like fingernails on wood. It came from inside the walls, near the baseboards in my bedroom. I assumed rats. I set traps, called pest control. They found nothing. But every night, the sound grew louder, and the cats grew more frantic. One night, around 3 a.m., I was jolted awake by a shriek. It wasn't human. It came from Milo. I found him in the hallway, hunched and bloody, his back leg clawed open like something had tried to drag him. Miso stood protectively in front of him, his body trembling. I took Milo to the emergency vet, an hour drive through the rain-soaked hills. The vet said it looked like an animal attack. But how? The house was sealed. There was no way anything had gotten in. That was when I started watching them. For the next few days, I followed the cats. I watched where they stared. I made notes, the same corners, the same darkened ceilings, the same stretch of hallway near the attic hatch. I started to feel watched. Not by the cats, by something else. There was one night I'll never forget. It was a Thursday. I was sitting at my kitchen table. The lights dimmed, tea growing cold in my hands. Milo had been released from the vet, stitched and sullen. He lay by my feet, purring weakly. Miso stood alert at the edge of the hallway, eyes wide and fixed on the ceiling above the pantry. I heard it, a whisper, faint, breathless. "Get out." The air went ice cold. The light above me flickered. Miso hissed, arched his back, and lunged at the wall, and the wall moved. I saw it, swear to God. The surface rippled like disturbed water. A shadow pushed through from the inside, briefly, like a hand pressing through silk, then vanished. That's when the lights died. The room plunged into darkness. The only sound was the teacup shattering on the floor and Miso's ragged breathing. And then came the footsteps. They started in the attic, slow, deliberate, step by step, creak by creak, moving toward the hatch at the end of the hallway. I didn't breathe. I heard the latch click. The panel shifted slightly, dust rained down, then silence. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room with both cats curled against me, flashlight in one hand, a fire poker in the other. At dawn, I knocked on Dorothy's door. She answered in a robe, curlers still in her hair, holding a small poodle to her chest. "I need to ask you something," I said, barely able to hide the tremble in my voice. Did anyone ever die in that house? Or say anything about it being haunted?" Dorothy's expression changed. The color drained from her face. "That house used to belong to the Wren family," she whispered. "They all died in that fire back in '92. Parents and 2 little girls. But they never found the girls' bodies." I felt the blood drain from my fingers. Dorothy lowered her voice. "Locals say their spirits stayed behind, watching, waiting. They say animals, especially cats, can see them. That's why no one stayed there more than a year since." I looked down at the scratches on my arm. New ones I hadn't noticed, thin and red, like little hands had reached for me in the night. I didn't respond, because suddenly I realized something I hadn't before. The cats weren't staring at nothing. They were watching something I wasn't meant to see. And they weren't afraid for themselves. They were afraid for me. The moment I stepped back inside the house, it felt different. The air was heavier somehow, dense, like walking into a room filled with smoke, even though nothing burned. Every breath I took tasted faintly of ashen mildew. The door creaked shut behind me, and both cats immediately appeared. One from under the couch, the other from the shadows near the hallway. Miso jumped onto the counter and pressed himself against my chest as if he were trying to tell me something. His purr low, troubled. Milo sat at the foot of the stairs, his yellow eyes trained not on me, but on the ceiling above the landing. They were alert again. I didn't even bother unpacking the groceries I had picked up in town. My hands were shaking too badly anyway. I left the bags by the door and walked slowly into the living room, pausing to glance at the corner beneath the window. That's where I first saw the scratch marks. 4 deep gouges in the drywall, low, near the baseboard, like something had clawed its way out of the wall itself. My heart stopped. Milo patted over, sniffed them, then looked up at me and let out a sharp, angry cry. I backed away. I hadn't seen those yesterday. I'm sure of it. I didn't know what to do. Every logical part of me said, leave, drive to a motel, get out now. But something kept me rooted, some mix of disbelief, denial, and dread. Like I needed proof of something I didn't have a name for. So I grabbed my phone, opened the voice recorder, and started documenting everything. Maybe it was a nervous reaction. Or maybe I just needed to believe I wasn't losing my mind. October 13th, 3:17 p.m., I whispered. New scratches in the wall beneath the window. Cats agitated again. Dorothy confirmed a fire. Missing children. House possibly connected to Wren family. No previous activity this strong. I paused, looked at Milo. I think they're trying to reach me or warn me. That night the dreams returned, or maybe I should call them visions. I was in the house again, but it was older, deeper wood tones, wallpaper I'd never seen before, the air thick with smoke. I was standing in the hallway by the attic hatch, and everything was burning. Flames licked the walls. I heard the screams. Two young girls, crying for their mother. One called out a name, Lila, over and over, but the mother never came. I awoke drenched in sweat, my sheets tangled, the room freezing. Milo lay beside me, growling lowly, eyes fixed on the closet door. The door was open. I never sleep with it open. I didn't remember opening it. I rose slowly, my breath fogging in the cold, and reached for the closet light. It flickered once, then steadied. Inside, nothing but my clothes and old boxes. But the smell, it was like burnt sugar and charred hair, the same smell from the dream. I slammed the door shut. That morning, I called Dorothy. I didn't know what I expected from her. A name, a priest, maybe just a witness. She picked up on the second ring, and when I asked if she'd ever been inside this house before, she hesitated. Once, she said, years ago, I was just a girl. I asked her what she remembered. A girl my age lived there. Her name was Lila Wren. The name from my dream. Dorothy sounded unsure. I only met her twice. Quiet, always seemed sad. Said things like she didn't sleep at night because the walls would whisper. Did she ever mention her cats? I asked. Dorothy paused. She had one. Black. Never left her side. They said it went missing the night of the fire. I hung up, unable to keep the chill out of my bones. That night, I set up cameras. Not fancy ones, just old baby monitors I found in a storage bin and my iPhone mounted on a tripod. I wanted to capture the hallway outside the attic, the living room corner, and the space under the coffee table where Milo had always stared. At 2:47 a.m., I woke to Milo scratching frantically at the bedroom door. The monitors were screeching, static-filled high-pitched shrills that set my teeth on edge. I rushed out, heart pounding. The hallway was empty, but the attic hatch was open. Just an inch. A thin string of soot-black dust had fallen to the floor beneath it. Miso was hissing from the top of the stairs, his fur ballooned out. He was looking at something I couldn't see. I took a step closer. That's when I saw the footprints. Tiny bare footprints, ash-colored, leading from the attic hatch down the hallway. They stopped at the linen closet. I pulled the door open. Nothing, only towels and bleach, but the cats refused to come near it. The next morning, I checked the recordings. At 2:36 a.m., the camera pointed at the coffee table began to shake, slightly, then violently. Milo is seen staring beneath it, then arching and bolting out of frame. At 2:40, the hallway camera captures a flicker, a blur of black darting across the screen. And at 2:44, a shape, barely discernible, but definitely there. The silhouette of a child, standing just beneath the attic hatch, staring down. Head tilted slightly. No eyes. Just shadows. My blood ran cold. I deleted nothing. I backed up the files and emailed them to myself. I needed a record. I needed someone else to see. I was beginning to fear that if I died, no one would ever believe what I saw in that house. By the afternoon, I had made a decision. I was going into the attic. I waited until the sun was at its highest, until the house was full of light and the cats were dozing nearby. I pulled down the ladder carefully, a flashlight in one hand and pepper spray in the other. Not that I thought it would help. The attic was silent, thick with dust and cobwebs, the kind that clung to your face like invisible threads. I stepped in slowly, feeling the boards groan beneath my feet. Boxes, an old trunk, something wrapped in plastic near the far wall. But then, in the corner, a child's drawing, pinned to the slanted wood with a rusted nail. 2 stick figures, one larger, one smaller, holding hands. A black scribble beside them, like a cat. Above them, crude flames, and under it all, in childish handwriting, "Leela and Lucy, we're still here." I turned and bolted. Miso and Milo were waiting at the bottom of the ladder, eyes wide, tails puffed. They meowed in unison, loud, insistent, like alarms. That night, the dreams were worse. This time, I wasn't a bystander. I was standing in the attic, holding a match, watching the drawing burn. And behind me, a child's voice whispering, "You let it in." When I woke up, my phone was on the floor. The file I had saved from the hallway camera, the one with the child's silhouette, was gone. Deleted. Only one thing remained in my inbox. An image attachment, the drawing from the attic. Except now, there were 3 figures holding hands, and the black scribble was bigger, almost human-shaped. I didn't draw it. I never touched it. But it was signed in the corner. "We see you too. There are moments in your life when you feel your sanity slipping, like a curtain pulling back from a reality you never wanted to see. The kind of moments where you question if you're truly awake, or if the nightmare has simply followed you into the day." I had been having those moments every hour now, since the drawing appeared in my inbox, since the black scribble grew taller, since it became human-shaped. I hadn't left the house in 2 days. The air outside felt no safer than inside. I kept the curtains drawn. The attic hatch was nailed shut, but it didn't matter. Whatever was watching me, it no longer needed doors. The cats had stopped sleeping. Milo remained by my side at all times, like a shadow with fur. Miso became a sentinel, guarding the hallway that led to my bedroom, refusing to eat unless I fed him by hand. They were trying to tell me something. I could feel it. Their bodies trembled when the lights flickered. Their ears twitched towards sounds I couldn't hear, but I was beginning to hear them too. At first it was faint, a rustling, like dry paper shuffling against itself. Then whispers, unintelligible, at the edge of sleep. A few nights ago, I awoke to the unmistakable sound of someone walking in circles around my bed. The floor creaked with every step, but when I reached for the lamp, the room lit up and no one was there, except Milo, staring straight at me, then at the empty space to my left. I couldn't explain what I felt, but it was like something was sharing my bed, breathing against my skin. Cold, heavy, claiming space. I decided I needed help, but not the kind you dial 911 for. I wasn't sure a priest would believe me either, so I reached out to someone I never thought I'd call. A woman named Irene Leclerc, paranormal investigator. Her website looked like it hadn't been updated since 2006, all pixelated graphics and clunky text. But her testimonials were unnervingly specific. One mentioned cats staring into walls. Another spoke of a fire that wouldn't go out until the children were heard. I sent an email, kept it short, included the drawing, the scratches, the camera footage I'd saved on a cloud drive. I didn't expect an answer. She called within 2 hours. Her voice was low and careful, like she was choosing each word from a shelf full of dangerous things. "You've got a shadow hitchhiker," she said. "They're rare. They don't attach to homes. They attach to people. Once it knows you can feel it, it gets stronger." I asked her what it wanted. "To be seen," she replied. "To be acknowledged, but it won't stop there. It'll need more. It always does." She offered to come by the next day, said she lived just outside Tacoma and had cleansed worse. Her confidence didn't comfort me. Neither did her final words before hanging up. "Keep your mirrors covered tonight. Don't ask why. Just do it." That night, I wrapped every mirror in black garbage bags, even the tiny one in the hallway near the light switch. I don't know what scared me more: the fact that I was following instructions from a stranger, or that I genuinely felt something change as soon as the glass was hidden. The house grew quieter, less cold, but only for a few hours. At 2:11 a.m., I heard scratching from inside the walls again. Not like before. This wasn't frantic or wild. It was slow, methodical. It followed a pattern. 3 long scratches, a pause, then 2 short ones. I recorded the sound on my phone and played it back in the morning, running the audio through a Morse code translator I found online. It spelled "I am you." I shut the laptop and backed away. Something had changed. It wasn't just trying to scare me anymore. It was trying to merge with me. I spent the morning pacing, holding Miso close to my chest like a child would a teddy bear. Milo wouldn't stop growling. At the windows, at the empty corners, at the shadows that seemed too thick in places where light should have reached. Then, just after 1 p.m., Irene arrived. She was not what I expected. Grey braid, long skirt, no makeup. Her eyes were cloudy, not blind, but clouded in that way old trees look weathered. She held a large canvas bag and walked with a limp, dragging her right foot slightly. But when she stepped over the threshold into my home, she stopped. Completely, like she had run into an invisible wall. "It's heavy," she muttered, eyes narrowing. "It's very heavy in here." She placed her hand on the doorframe, closed her eyes. The cats came running, both of them, and curled around her legs like they'd known her forever. Irene knelt, whispering something I couldn't hear, and both cats let out a soft purring hum. "They're your protectors," she said to me, standing slowly. "But they're tired." I led her inside. I showed her the drawing, the camera footage, the scratches in the wall, the attic. She examined everything without flinching. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small mirror, one that had been cracked through the center. "Look into this," she instructed. "Don't blink." I hesitated. "I thought you said to keep mirrors covered." "This one's different. It doesn't show what you look like. It shows what's behind you." My hands trembled as I took the mirror, held it up, and for a second, just a second, I saw her. A little girl with hair matted to her cheeks, eyes gone black, mouth open in a silent scream, standing just behind my left shoulder, and something taller behind her, faceless, crawling with fingers that didn't stop at 10. A shadow that breathed like it had lungs but not skin. I dropped the mirror. It shattered. Irene placed her hand on my arm. "You've been chosen," she said quietly, "not by the child, by what came after." I didn't speak. "What you're dealing with, it's not human anymore. It might have been once, but now it wears her like a mask." That night we prepared the house, salt at every door, Black candles lit in a circle in the living room. Irene burned dried herbs that filled the air with a bitter, metallic tang. The cats sat inside the circle with me. Irene stood at the edge, chanting in a language I didn't recognize. The house began to shake. The lights flickered, died, and then came the laughter. High, childlike, but wrong, twisted at the edges like a smile, stretched too far. Then a voice from the attic. It spoke in my voice. You let me in. The attic hatch snapped open. A rope fell through, but not a rope. Hair, long, black, covered in soot, and behind it, a pale hand gripping the edge. Milo shrieked. Miso ran to the base of the attic and began clawing at the wood. Irene screamed, "Don't let it cross the circle," but it already had. Something tall and thin stepped down from the shadows. I saw its eyes, flat like glass, and a face that shifted from mine to the child's to nothing at all, and then it spoke again. "We're already inside you." The candles blew out, and the house fell silent. I don't remember falling. I don't even remember screaming. All I remember is the darkness pressing in on me, thick like water, wrapping itself around my arms, my throat, my thoughts. The sound of the candles going out was louder than I expected, like dozens of mouths gasping in unison. And then silence, complete and unnatural silence. Even the cats stopped making noise. When I opened my eyes again, I was lying on the floor outside the circle. The salt was gone, blown into thin lines that spiraled across the hardwood, like something had crawled through them, dragging itself forward in messy, hungry circles. The candles had melted completely, pooling black wax around the feet of the coffee table. My phone was missing, but worse, Irene was gone. Only her canvas bag remained, lying near the entryway, its contents spilled. Bits of sage, a cracked amulet, a single brass bell that had been snapped in half, and a note, written in hurried, jagged script. "It's not a spirit, it's a remnant. It feeds on identity. Do not answer when it speaks in your voice." My breath caught, because I had. That night, in the attic, when it said, "You let me in," and I whispered back, "Who are you?" It wasn't a question. It was a key, and I had turned it. I sat on the floor for hours, listening, hoping to hear Irene's voice outside, her footsteps on the porch, her chant from the hallway. But nothing came. The only sounds were the low, rhythmic thuds from the walls, like something pacing behind the drywall or inside it. Milo stayed close to my side, tail swishing nervously. Meso was nowhere to be found. When I finally stood, it was like moving through thick syrup. The house felt off, a degree to the left of reality, familiar but warped. I went to the bathroom and got a glimpse of myself in the mirror over the sink, and stopped, because I didn't blink. I should have. I stared at my reflection, willing it to move, to mirror me. It didn't. Instead, my reflection smiled, just slightly, as if it knew something I didn't. I covered the mirror with a towel and backed away, heart racing. There were new rules in the house now. Rules I didn't understand, and I was already breaking them. The days blurred. I stopped keeping track of time. My phone was still gone. My laptop wouldn't turn on. The clocks in the house spun endlessly, their hands twitching as if being dragged by invisible magnets. I tried to leave once, packed a bag, grabbed the cats, stepped out onto the front porch, and the trees were gone. The road was gone. Just mist, endless and thick like milk, stretching in every direction. I walked for what felt like hours, Miso shivering in his grate, Milo howling low and broken, until I circled back to the same house. No matter where I went, the house was there, waiting. It wanted me to come back. And so I did. On the fifth day, or what I think was the fifth, I found something new. It was a door at the end of the hallway where the linen closet had always been. But the closet was gone now. In its place, an old wooden door with a brass knob. No keyhole, no markings. Just a thin line carved into the wood in the shape of a spiral. The cats wouldn't go near it. Milo hissed whenever I got too close. Miso flattened himself beneath the couch and refused to come out. I left the door alone that day. But that night, I dreamed of it. I stood in the hallway, my hand on the knob, and something on the other side whispered in my voice, "I know your name. You belong here now. Let me show you who you really are." I woke with dirt under my fingernails. The door was open a crack, and beyond it, nothing but pitch black. That's when the house started changing. Photos I didn't take appeared in my drawers. Pictures of me asleep, of me walking through the hallways with my eyes closed. One showed me standing in front of the attic hatch, mouth open in a silent scream. Another showed me staring into the mirror. Except in the photo, my eyes were missing. Just two dark holes. And behind me, a shape with too many arms. I tried to burn them, but the fire wouldn't catch. Instead, the photos curled at the edges, blackened, then reverted to their original state, as if they wanted to be seen, as if the house was documenting me, keeping score. I stopped sleeping. The house didn't allow for it anymore. Every time I closed my eyes, the whispers returned. They grew bolder now, closer. They called themselves by names I'd never heard, but recognized deep in my bones. Lucy, Lila, us. I heard Irene's voice once, only once. It came from the attic, hoarse and thin, like it had traveled miles to reach me. "Don't trust your voice," she said. "Don't let it become your thoughts." I cried when I heard her, and for a moment, I believed I could still escape, until I turned and saw myself standing in the hallway, still, silent and smiling. Then came the blood. It started as drips, small perfect circles on the floor near the spiral door. At first I thought it was from one of the cats, but they were fine. Shaken, exhausted, but unhurt. The blood was warm, fresh. It led to the door. And when I opened it just a sliver wider, I heard breathing. A woman's, but not my own. And behind it, something wet, like skin sliding across tile. I shut the door and nailed it closed. Again, but the blood still came. Under the crack, pooling like a mouth ready to open. On what I think was the seventh night, I heard a knock at the front door. 3 soft taps. Nothing else. I didn't move. Neither did the cats. Then again. 3 taps, then silence. And then, it's me. My voice, clear, calm, coming from the other side of the door. "I left something. Just let me in real quick." I stood frozen because I had left nothing outside, and I was already inside. The voice came again. "Don't be scared. You know me." The doorknob turned slightly, then stopped. That was the moment I realized. The house hadn't just trapped me. It was replacing me. I write this now by candlelight, unsure how much longer I'll remain me. The mirror has started talking when I pass it. Silent movements of my reflection's lips, mouthing things I'm too afraid to read. Milo no longer leaves my side. Miso has started howling at nothing. sitting in corners and wailing until his voice goes hoarse. The spiral door opens more each day, no matter how many nails I hammer into it. The hallway behind it is growing. It stretches farther now. Sometimes I hear children laughing. Sometimes I hear them crying. And sometimes, when I listen very closely, I hear the sound of my own voice screaming for help. But I never remember making the sound. And neither do the cats, because they've started staring at me. Story 6. The statue doesn't need legs to reach my bed. I was the one who wanted the house. Not Greg, not our 2 daughters, me. Something about the high ceilings and the old woodwork made me feel like we were stepping into a place with history. A place that remembered. And maybe that should have been a warning. Because things that remember can also resent. The house sat at the end of Ashfield Road in rural Virginia. A place where the trees hung low like they were eavesdropping, and the air always felt like dusk, even at noon. It had belonged to an old couple who died within months of each other. Or so the realtor said. No one in town bought it. For 7 years, it stood empty, until we came along. The living room was what sold me. Bay windows, thick velvet drapes, a massive fireplace with chipped white paint, and above it, a mantel that stretched from wall to wall like an altar. That's where the figurines were. 7 porcelain figures, all women, dressed in Victorian-era gowns, their faces dainty and colorless, lips closed in eternal whispers. Some held parasols, others clutched small dogs or books, but each had one thing in common. Their eyes were painted pitch black. I should have asked the realtor to remove them before we moved in, but she told me with a shrug. They've been there forever. None of the cleaners wanted to touch them. At the time, I thought it was superstition. Now, I'm not so sure. The first night in the house was uneventful. Our youngest Ellie wouldn't stop crying. She said her bedroom window kept tapping even though the trees were nowhere near it. Greg brushed it off as raccoons. We were still unpacking, so I didn't think much of it. But on the second night, I noticed the first shift. I walked into the living room early in the morning, a steaming mug of coffee in my hand, and one of the figurines, Lady in Blue, I later came to call her, was no longer on the far left. She was dead center, her face turned toward the window. I stood there, staring at her for a full minute, trying to piece together if I had done it myself and just forgotten. Maybe one of the movers, but none of them had that go near the fireplace. I remembered that clearly. I chalked it up to being tired. Or maybe I just didn't want to start feeling afraid in a home I had begged for. That afternoon, I asked Greg if he noticed anything strange about the figurines. He didn't even look up from his phone. I don't think I've even looked at them, he said. You know those things creep me out. I let it go. By the end of our first week, I had names for all 7 figurines. Lady in Blue, the Governess, Rose, Miss Bellamy, the Mourner, Pearl, and the one who points. That last one was the worst. She stood with her hand extended, a single porcelain finger raised as if accusing someone in the room. Her face was blank. Unlike the others, her lips weren't even painted. Just a skin-toned glaze, smooth and expressionless. Each morning, I found her pointing at a different wall, and sometimes a different room entirely. Ellie began waking up with scratches on her arms. The woman in my closet doesn't like toys on the floor, she told me one night, her tiny voice trembling. I asked her what the woman looked like. She doesn't have a mouth, she whispered. but she talks anyway. The turning point came on a Wednesday, one of those stormy autumn days when the wind sounded like it was dragging nails across the windows. Greg had taken Anna, our oldest, to piano lessons in town, leaving just me and Ellie at home. I was folding laundry upstairs when I heard it. Clink, a sound like glass tapping ceramic. Not loud, but deliberate. It came from downstairs. I crept down the steps, heart pounding in my throat. The living room was empty. The rain had begun to beat against the window panes, drawing long shadows across the carpet. And then I saw it. One figurine, Pearl, was no longer on the mantel. She stood in the hallway, facing the staircase. My breath caught. I stood there, gripping the banister like a lifeline, trying to convince myself that someone had moved her, that maybe Greg had knocked her over and placed her there and forgotten. But Greg was gone. I picked Pearl up and, despite the chill on her surface, returned her to the mantel. And then I checked the door locks. All three. They were bolted tight. That night I woke at 2:11 a.m. to a soft creaking noise. I assumed it was the wind, until I noticed my bedroom door was cracked open. We never leave it open. Greg lay snoring beside me, oblivious. I slipped out of bed, tiptoed across the room, and peeked into the hallway. The governess was standing in front of Ellie's door. No, not standing. That would be impossible. But there she was, just there, her porcelain dress shimmering faintly under the hallway nightlight. Her back to me, facing my daughter's door. I didn't scream. I don't know why. My body locked in place, like I was the figurine now. I gathered the courage to move, snatched the figure, and brought it back downstairs. Heart pounding like it would rupture. I was shaking so hard, I nearly dropped her. I didn't sleep that night. Neither did Ellie. She said she dreamed of cracked faces and someone whispering inside her pillow. By the 10th day, I knew it wasn't us. The figurines were moving on their own. Watching, following, choosing. I began setting up my phone at night, placing it discreetly on the mantel to record. But every morning, the footage was gone. Deleted. I stopped sleeping. I stopped eating. I was becoming part of the house. And then, on the 11th day, I saw her. It was around 3 a.m. I couldn't sleep and went downstairs for a glass of water. The house was silent except for the groan of old wood. I reached the kitchen and, out of the corner of my eye, caught movement by the bay window. Lady in blue. She was not on the mantel. She was by the window. No, not just by the window. She was facing outside, as if waiting. And then she turned her head. She turned her head. Her body remained still, but her head moved. Just a fraction. Just enough for me to know this wasn't some dream or hallucination. And in the reflection of the window, I saw them all 7 figurines standing in a line behind me. Except when I turned around. The room was empty, only the mantel remained, still, unchanged, but in my hand, I found something cold. A shard of porcelain and a note, scrawled in clumsy, childlike letters. She's out now. And that was the first time I realized there were only ever supposed to be 7. Now, there are 8. I didn't tell Greg. Not about the shard, not about the note, not about the way her head moved like it wasn't bound by porcelain anymore. Some part of me hoped I was unraveling. That sleep deprivation had finally taken its toll, and all I needed was a few hours of rest to return everything to normal. But deep down, I knew better. The house had stopped pretending. The following morning, I did what any mother would. I kept my children home from school. I don't feel good, Ellie mumbled, half awake and clutching her favorite plush cat. I stroked her hair. I know, baby. You're staying home. Anna didn't protest either. She was pale and silent at breakfast, poking at her cereal like she didn't see it. Greg had left early for work. He was working on some court case downtown, and I didn't mention what had happened. I wanted to wait until I had something concrete, something I could show him. The last time I brought up the figurines, he told me it was probably just the girls playing tricks. They weren't. They were afraid too. They just didn't have the words to say it. By midday, the sky turned that dull gray that always precedes a cold snap. The kind of sky that sits heavy above the roof and presses against the windows like it wants in. I turned up the heat and herded the girls into the upstairs playroom with snacks, books, and my old iPad. I'll be right downstairs, I told them. Ellie looked up at me and asked, "Do we have to stay in this room?" I paused. "Why?" "Because she walks past it," she whispered. "The one with the crack in her." I didn't ask what she meant. I just kissed her forehead and shut the door softly behind me. I returned to the living room. The mantel was full again. 7 figurines, each in their place, exactly where they were supposed to be. But I knew they weren't the same. The positions were off. Subtle things. The one who points used to stand straight. Now her finger was slightly angled upward. Rose held her book closed before. Now it was cracked open. The Mona no longer looked downward, but slightly to the left, like she was glancing at someone new. The 8th figurine wasn't there. Instead, I found her upstairs. It was in the guest bedroom, a room we rarely entered, filled with boxes and half-unpacked furniture. She stood on the windowsill, small, unassuming. A new figurine. This one didn't look like the others. Her dress was darker, more modern, like something out of the 1920s. A flapper-style cut. Her arms were behind her back. Her head was tilted slightly, but her face was not painted. It was smooth, featureless, like someone had dipped her head in thick white gloss and forgot to finish her. But even faceless, she was watching. I approached slowly, my pulse pounding behind my ears. My fingers hovered above her, shaking. As I reached out to touch her, I heard it. A faint, barely there giggle. Not a child's, not human. It came from the air behind me. Just a breath of sound. I spun around. The room was empty, but the air felt occupied. I picked up the new figurine and brought her downstairs, clutching her like a weapon. I didn't place her with the others. I couldn't. It felt wrong. Instead, I set her inside the locked china cabinet. Glass front, thick wooden frame. I wedged her between 2 old bowls from Greg's mother and turned the key. I still have the key in my pocket. Even now, that night, I made sure all doors were locked. I placed a kitchen chair against our bedroom door. I plugged in a nightlight in every room of the house. The girls slept in my bed, one on each side, their tiny bodies pressed close. Sometime past 3 in the morning, I woke to the sound of glass cracking. It echoed faintly, not shattering, just a pressure, like something was pushing against it. I got up, careful not to wake them, and padded barefoot down the stairs. The house groaned around me, not from age. It was a wet sound, like something breathing through wood. I reached the china cabinet. The glass was splintering. Long, thin cracks ran down the door, radiating from where the new figurine was pressing her head forward. Her face was still featureless, but the glass around her forehead bulged outward, like she'd been butting against it. I took a trembling step back. A voice echoed behind me. Not loud, not even angry. Just there. Why did you lock me away? I turned. No one, but every figurine on the mantel now faced inward. They were staring at the empty center, where the eighth should have stood. The next day, I brought in someone from town, a woman named Georgia Maddox. She ran a metaphysical shop on Main Street, filled with crystals and sage and incense that made your head spin. I had met her once during the summer festival when she read my palm and told me I carried a heavy ancestral echo. At the time, I laughed. I wasn't laughing now. Georgia didn't laugh either. She walked into the house and froze. I don't like the feel of this place, she said, before I even offered her tea. I showed her the figurines, the cabinet. I didn't say a word. I just watched her face. She didn't touch them, not once. She circled them, slowly, her eyes narrowing. They weren't made to be separated, she said softly. Then what are they? I whispered. She looked at me, and her eyes were wide and wet, like she had swallowed something awful. Vessels, she said. They house things. Things that remember how to become. I didn't want to know more. I thought I did, but I didn't. Before she left, Georgia pressed a small cloth pouch into my hand. Hang this above the cabinet, tonight. And if anything whispers to you, don't answer. What if it asks for help? She met my gaze. It's not you it wants help from. That night, I hung the pouch, some mix of herbs and tiny bones, above the cabinet and locked every door again. I told Greg everything. To my surprise, he didn't scoff. He just looked tired. I've been seeing her too, he said quietly. My mouth went dry. Where? In mirrors. Just for a second. She's always smiling. But it's not a happy smile. It's like she's already decided something. We didn't sleep. We sat up, backs to the headboard, waiting. Around 2:37 a.m., we heard Ellie scream. We ran to her room. She wasn't in her bed, but the window was wide open, and on the floor, arranged in a perfect circle, were 7 figurines, not 8. 7. The 8th was gone. I don't remember screaming, but Greg told me I did. Said it was the kind of scream that breaks something inside you. The window was still open, letting in the sharp scent of pine and frost-bitten soil. Curtains fluttered in the cold wind. Ellie's tiny shoes were on the floor by her bed, like she'd climbed out barefoot. But there was no blood, no scuff marks, no sign of struggle. Just 7 figurines arranged on the wooden floorboards in a perfect mocking circle. Greg bolted down the stairs to check the yard, flashlight in hand. I collapsed to my knees and began calling her name, over and over. Nothing answered. Not even an echo. But as I reached to gather the figurines, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Each one had a crack. Thin fractures like lightning etched in glaze. Running down their faces, their necks, their delicate arms, like they'd split from the inside. And at the center of the circle, where Ellie should have been, there was a single footprint, tiny, bare, glazed in porcelain sheen. The police arrived within 20 minutes. I remember the look on Officer Langley's face when we told him she vanished through an open window on the 2nd floor during a windless night. He looked at us like we were the crazy ones. She's 6, Mrs. Dalton. Are you sure she didn't just run off? Kids do that sometimes. In the middle of the night? I hissed. Without shoes? In this cold? He shrugged. Maybe she got confused. Sleepwalking. It happens. They sent out a search team, dogs, and everything. Even drones by morning. They found nothing. No footprints. No broken branches. No signs of entry or exit. But I knew she hadn't walked into the woods. She had been taken. And I knew what had done it. After the search teams left and the sun began to drop again, I went to the china cabinet. It was empty. The 8th figurine was gone. The glass door had shattered completely, shards littering the floor like fallen teeth. And on the inside wall of the cabinet, scrawled in something too dark and viscous to be marker or pen, was a message. I need her to finish the face. I fell backward and vomited into the sink. My vision pulsed at the edges. The words throbbed behind my eyelids, even when I closed them. Something was building. Something I had invited into my home and let nest in the walls like rot. And now it had Ellie. That night I returned to Georgia Maddox's shop. It was well past closing, but the lights were on. A single bulb swung gently in the back room. When I knocked, she didn't answer, but the door creaked open anyway. The smell of burnt sage and something metallic hung in the air. "Georgia?" I called out. She stepped into the doorway from the back room, eyes bloodshot, hands shaking. "I warned you not to answer," she said. "I didn't," I cried. "I never said anything to it." "But she took my daughter. Please, tell me how to get her back." Georgia didn't speak for a long time, just stared at me, as though deciding whether I was worth the truth. Then finally she whispered, "The 8th isn't part of the set." "What do you mean?" "She's an imposter, a mimic. The 7 were created to contain her, to keep her in place. Something shattered the balance. And now she's out." "Then the figurines were protectors?" Georgia nodded. "Bindings, old magic, objects imbued with containment rites. Each one bore part of the burden of holding her inside." My throat closed around my next breath. "And now that they're cracking, she's bleeding into the world." I thought about the fractures, the circle, the way they seemed to look inward the last time I saw them. "She wants a face," I said, barely hearing myself. Georgia turned away. "She doesn't just want it. She needs it, to stay here, to exist in flesh. And she's chosen your daughter as the vessel." I didn't wait until morning. I drove straight home, engine roaring down Ashfield Road, headlights slicing the fog. Greg was pacing on the porch when I arrived, eyes wide and haunted. "She's here," he whispered before I could say a word. "I saw her." I grabbed his arm. "Where?" She was standing at the edge of the woods, just outside the backyard. But it wasn't Ellie. Not really. Her arms were too long. Her skin was cracked. And she was smiling with teeth that didn't fit her mouth. We didn't go back inside. Not yet. Instead, we made our way to the backyard, flashlights trembling in our hands. The grass crunched beneath our boots. The trees swayed in a wind we couldn't feel. And then we saw it. At the base of the sycamore tree, half buried in the soil, was the 8th figurine. Her featureless face was now half formed. A single eye, painted in jet black. A crease where a mouth would be. But worst of all, her arms were no longer behind her back. They were outstretched and reaching up toward the tree. I looked up. There, nestled between the gnarled branches, hung something pale. Not a body, not quite. A doll. No, a mannequin. No, it was Ellie, or a shell of her. But her skin was cold porcelain, her dress unfamiliar, her lips painted shut, and behind her eyes something moved. We brought her down. She didn't fight, Didn't scream, didn't blink. She stared straight ahead, unmoving, unblinking, her chest rising with slow mechanical breath. Greg wept. I held her hand, feeling the cold bite of ceramic under what should have been skin. The next day, she still hadn't spoken. She sat at the table, head slightly tilted, watching. Always watching. And that night, we heard them again. Footsteps in the attic, whispers in the vents. The figurines returned to the mantel, somehow repaired. But now there were 8, and every night since, one of them disappears. Just for a little while, long enough to watch. There's a difference between pretending and not knowing. Pretending is what Greg does now. Waking up at dawn, making pancakes that no one eats, humming under his breath like the sound might drown out the silence pressing against our walls. Not knowing was what I used to have, a kind of blessed ignorance. But now I know. And every second I stay in this house, I feel her watching me through the cracks in my daughter's face. It's been 9 days since we found her in the tree. 9 days of trying to coax her to speak, to move, to be. But Ellie is gone. I've accepted that. This thing sitting in her place, wearing her pajamas, clutching her plush cat, blinking every so often with a mechanical flutter. It isn't her. It wears her like a garment, a costume. On the 4th night, I crept into her room and placed a mirror across from her bed. She didn't react, didn't shift. But in the mirror, I saw 2 of her. One sitting on the bed, and one crouched under it. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in the hallway, back against the wall, staring into the dark gap beneath the door, listening. Just before 3 a.m., I heard the whisper again. Low, inhuman, almost gentle. Let me be her. I don't remember standing, just opening the door. Ellie, not Ellie, was asleep on the bed. Still, breath shallow, eyes closed. The mirror was shattered, and underneath the bed, claw marks scraped long grooves into the wooden floorboards. From the inside, like something was trying to climb up. The next day, Greg found me burning the figurines in the backyard. He screamed, tried to stop me, but the fire had already caught by the time he tackled me to the ground. "What are you doing?" he yelled, grabbing my wrists. "They're letting it in," I sobbed. "Every night, one of them goes missing. And when it comes back, something in the house is wrong." He looked at the fire, at the black smoke curling into the pale sky, at the fragments of porcelain cracking in the heat. And for once, he didn't argue. He just whispered, "Then what's left in the house now?" That night, the 8th figurine returned. We hadn't seen her since the burning, but now, she stood on the mantel again, untouched by soot, unbroken, smiling. And behind her, in the flickering reflection of the window, I saw them. More than 7, more than 8, a whole line of them, stretching into the dark. I called Georgia the next morning. She didn't answer. When I drove to her shop, the windows were boarded shut. A handwritten sign pinned to the door read, "Closed until further notice. Don't come looking for me." But someone had scribbled over it in charcoal. "She already found you." Ellie still doesn't speak, but sometimes, late at night, she hums. It's a tune I don't recognize. Slow, off-key, a melody that feels older than this house, older than anything. Last night, as I lay on the floor of her bedroom, she began humming again, and the stuffed cat in her arms turned its head toward me. Not fast, not sudden, just enough. Greg's losing it in his own way. He's taken to sleeping in the garage, keeping the door cracked open and the lights on all night. He says the attic makes too much noise. I don't argue. The attic's been breathing lately. You can hear it if you stand on the third stair from the top. Slow, rhythmic expansions of the ceiling, like the house is inhaling. Something's inside the walls. Or maybe it is the walls. I've stopped asking questions. I just listen. This morning, I woke to find a new figurine beside my bed. She wasn't there when I fell asleep. She wasn't on the mantel. She was just there. Unlike the others, this one had my face, but her mouth had been erased, smoothed over, like it had never existed. When I picked her up, her eyes opened, black, endless, and I heard a voice, deep in my skull, not in my ears. It's your turn to go under. I threw it out, of course. Drove 10 miles into town and buried it beneath the dirt behind an old church. But when I got home, she was waiting on my pillow, cracks spreading like roots down her painted cheeks. This house won't let us leave. I tried last week, packed the girls' bags, carried Ellie, who still hadn't spoken, into the car. But as I reached the end of the driveway, the road kept bending, looping back, twisting, until we were parked outside the house again, headlights beaming into the front door like a warning. And Ellie? She opened her mouth. She smiled and said, "Almost ready now. Greg says we should try again. Try harder. Drive until the tank runs dry. Walk if we have to. But I'm not so sure anymore. Because last night, I dreamed of the attic, not the real one. The other attic, the one that doesn't exist in our floor plan. In the dream, I climbed the steps alone. The door pulsed like skin stretched over bone. Inside, shelves lined the walls, each one holding faces. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Some cracked, some half-finished. And at the center of the room was a mirror, covered in cloth. When I pulled it away, I didn't see myself. I saw the figurine, smiling, standing behind me, whispering something I couldn't hear. But I felt it, like breath on my neck. Almost done. Now I sit at the kitchen table, watching Ellie stir her cereal with a finger that clicks faintly. Porcelain on porcelain. Her other hand twitches sometimes, like something inside is still learning how to use it. Greg won't come downstairs. He says the basement door is open again, even though we bolted it last week. He swears something's calling to him from down there. A voice that sounds like me, only deeper. I don't know what's going to happen tonight, but I found something in Ellie's closet just now, tucked behind her old backpack. Another figurine, tiny, still forming, with Greg's face and no mouth. Story 7. Blood Legacy, The Scent. No one can cleanse. I first noticed the smell on a Thursday. It was faint, barely more than a suggestion in the air. Sweet, like jasmine, left too long in the sun. I thought it was just a lingering scent from the open window. Maybe something had bloomed outside overnight. Vermont was like that in the fall. Cool mornings, damp leaves, and strange fragrances carried on the breeze from somewhere unknown. But by the next morning, the scent was still there. It had seeped into the hallway outside my bedroom, coiling like smoke against the baseboards and trailing down the stairs. I paused halfway to the kitchen, nose twitching, trying to place it. There was something off about it, not entirely unpleasant, but unsettling in its persistence, like the perfume of someone long dead who hadn't realized they were no longer welcome. I checked the trash, the sink, even the dog bed, though I hadn't owned a pet in years. Nothing. I lit a candle and opened every window. Still, the smell clung to the air like a memory. And then, just as suddenly as it had arrived, it was gone. I didn't think about it again until the night Aunt Clarice died. She passed 3 days later, quietly, in her sleep. The coroner said it was a stroke, peaceful, natural. But when I walked into her house the next morning to help my cousin saw through the paperwork, the scent hit me like a wall. Same clawing sweetness, same haunting familiarity. "You smell that?" I asked, standing in the narrow hallway just inside the front door. My cousin, Marlene, wrinkled her nose. "Smell what?" "The house, that floral scent." She shook her head. "Clarisse always burned incense. You know that. Maybe it's just old smoke." But I wasn't convinced. This was the same scent. Exactly the same. Not from a stick of incense, not a candle or an air freshener. Something deeper. Something that felt alive. Like it was watching me. I stayed late that night, helping pack up her photographs, her journals, the ceramic dolls she collected and arranged on a dusty shelf in the hallway. Clarice had never married. No children, no husband. Just Marlene, her only niece, and me. The great niece she tolerated only because I reminded her of my mother. Before I left, I walked upstairs alone to the bedroom where she died. The scent was strongest there, almost overwhelming. I stood at the threshold, afraid to step inside, heart thudding hard against my ribs. The room was untouched, pill bottle still on the nightstand, a half-finished novel face down on the quilt. The moment I crossed the threshold, something shifted. The air grew dense, heavier. I blinked, and for a split second, no more than the beat of a heart, I thought I saw a shadow move across the far wall. A tall, stooped figure with its head tilted too far to the side, like it was listening, then it was gone. I stood there, gripping the doorknob until my hand ached. The scent curled around me, thick and sweet and wrong. I backed out of the room without turning my back. That night the smell followed me home. It settled into the curtains first. No matter how long I washed them, the scent remained, woven into the fabric like blood into silk. It crept into my clothes, into the cushions of the couch, into the pages of my books. I became obsessed. I scrubbed, bleached, tossed out half my wardrobe. I even replaced the carpets, convinced there must be mold or some chemical leak in the walls. Nothing worked. And then the dreams started. They weren't violent, just heavy, oppressive. I would wake up gasping, drenched in sweat, certain that someone had been standing in the corner of my room, watching, smiling, waiting. The worst part? I could never remember their face. One night, I woke to find my bedroom window open. I never leave it open. The smell was so thick I gagged. I stumbled toward the window, only to find something etched into the condensation on the glass. "You were supposed to follow." I fell backward, hit the edge of the bed frame. My knees gave out. The house was dead silent, but I knew I wasn't alone. I could feel it, something hovering just beyond my sight, breathing in rhythm with mine. When I checked the window in the morning, the message was gone, but the scent had soaked into the wood. I didn't sleep the next night, or the one after. I called my mother on the 4th day. She answered with a tired voice. "I was wondering when you'd notice." My blood ran cold. What are you talking about? That smell, the one you're about to describe to me. Sweet like flowers. But it sticks in your throat, doesn't it? Like it's decaying. My skin prickled. You've smelled it? Once, she said, her voice low. After your grandfather died. I smelled it in the hallway for weeks. Then again, when your cousin Philip disappeared. Disappeared? I blinked. Mom, you told me he ran away. That's what we all said, what we had to say. But he didn't run. He was taken. Or called. Like the rest of them. My mouth went dry. What do you mean called? There's a reason we never talk about your great-grandmother's death, she said, voice cracking. Or what they found in the root cellar. Some parts of this family, they don't die. They wait. And the scent, that's how they find their way back. I couldn't breathe. You need to get out of that house, Emma. Burn the clothes. Don't sleep near mirrors. And for God's sake, if you hear someone whisper your name at night, don't answer. But, click, she hung up. It's been 2 days since that call. The scent hasn't faded. It's stronger now, almost physical. I catch myself talking out loud when I'm alone. I don't even notice until it's too late. Last night, I woke up with muddy footprints leading from the front door to the foot of my bed. I live alone. This morning, I found a letter in my mailbox. No stamp, no name. Just one sentence scribbled in red ink. We never buried the right one. And that's when I remembered. Clarice had a twin. Stillborn. Or so they said. I think it's time I opened the attic. There are boxes up there no one's touched in decades. And the scent, it's seeping upward now. Toward the ceiling. Toward the hidden door. In the hall I've never dared to unlock. Something is waiting. And it smells like home. I waited until the sun was high. Until the light cut long and golden through the windows. Like it might burn away whatever still lingered in the shadows. Only then did I retrieve the old iron key. It had hung on a hook in the kitchen for as long as I could remember, polished smooth by years of forgetful touches and passing glances. Growing up, I never asked about it, neither did my mother. It was just there, like the stain beneath the sink no one could scrub away, or the attic door no one used. But now I knew. The attic wasn't empty. Something had been calling me. I climbed the creaking stairs slowly, step by step, feeling the key press against my palm like a warning. At the top, the locked door stood flush against the hallway wall, painted over at some point, nearly hidden beneath coats of aging white. But the outline was clear now, painfully so, as if the wood had swelled recently, or breathed. The lock turned easily, almost too easily. I pulled the door open. The attic air hit me like a slap, dry, warm, and carrying that scent, thick now, like rotting lilies left in stagnant water. It coated my throat, my skin, my teeth. I gagged. Inside was only darkness. No light bulb, no windows, just pitch black. I reached for my phone and turned on the flashlight. The beam swept over boxes stacked to the ceiling, warped trunks, dust-choked shelves. Mice skittered in corners. The wood groaned beneath my feet. Every breath echoed too loudly. I stepped inside, and the door shut itself behind me. My flashlight flickered. I froze. For a moment, I was 13 again, lost in my grandfather's barn, surrounded by shadows that moved when they shouldn't. I remembered his voice calling my name from the rafters. He'd been dead for 3 months by then. I never told anyone. Now, In that attic, the silence grew dense. The light steadied. I pressed forward, eyes scanning the space. One trunk in particular drew my attention. Black leather, rusted locks, a faded monogram burned into the side. MEW, Margaret Eleanor Whitlock. My great-grandmother. The one they never talked about. The one who fell into the well one winter and was buried without a wake. I knelt and opened the trunk. Inside were rows of small glass vials, each one sealed with wax and labeled in handwriting too neat to be comforting. Most had faded with age, but I could still make out a few. Juliet, 1962. F. Whitlock, 1971. Clarice, pending. I dropped the vial. It didn't break. The wax had yellowed, but inside the glass, something dark swirled, thick and slow, like coagulated ink or, God help me, blood. I shoved the lid closed. Then I saw the book. It was wedged beneath an old quilt, bound in cracked leather, its pages brittle with age. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside were names, pages, and pages of them, dates, notes, and symbols, strange, curling marks that looked like letters but didn't belong to any alphabet I recognized. At the top of one page, a title etched in red ink, "The line must be kept." There was a passage beneath it, one I read 3 times before it made any sense. The bond cannot die unless the bloodline dies with it. The fragrance will come first, a herald of the waking. The chosen will smell it and remember. She will see with eyes that aren't hers. She will unlock what should have stayed shut. I slammed the book closed, my hands shaking. Behind me, something creaked. I turned. No one, but the smell was stronger now, almost choking. I bolted down the stairs, key forgotten, breath ragged. The hallway looked different. The walls seemed narrower, the shadows too deep. I swore the house had shifted while I was gone. I made it to the kitchen and collapsed into a chair. The phone rang. I didn't want to answer it, but I did. "Emma?" My mother whispered. "How did you know I'd be here?" I didn't. Her voice trembled. "I just had a dream. You were in the attic, and someone else was too." I couldn't speak. "You opened the trunk, didn't you?" "Who was she?" I asked. "Margaret." "What did she do?" My mother was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "She made a bargain. During the war, when rations were tight, she went to the old woman in Duskmire Hollow, the one people now say never existed. She wanted to protect the family, and she paid for it with the only thing she had." "What?" "Her soul," she whispered. "But it came with conditions. One descendant, every generation, had to be given back to keep the others safe." The scent pulsed around me like a heartbeat. "And if we stop giving?" "Then it comes back, through the scent, through memory, through blood." The line went dead. That night I found scratches on my bedroom door. Not from an animal, too high, too human. 3 long gashes dragged downward, like fingers. I didn't sleep. At 2:13 a.m., I heard a voice say my name. Soft, familiar. It was Clarice's voice, but Clarice was dead. I opened the bedroom door slowly. Nothing. Then I turned and saw the photograph on my nightstand. It was a picture of me and Clarice from a summer years ago. Except now, her eyes were missing, hollowed out, burned away, and something had been scrawled across the bottom of the photo in black ink. "You're next. It's your turn to remember." I dropped it. The frame shattered. The smell was everywhere now. In my clothes, in my skin, in my blood. And I finally understood what the book meant. The scent wasn't just a warning. It was an invitation. And I had already accepted it the moment I walked into that attic. The next morning, I awoke to find my front door wide open. I live alone. I had locked it the night before. Triple locked it, in fact. 2 bolts and a chain. But now it yawned into the early morning fog like a gaping mouth. No signs of forced entry. No footprints on the welcome mat. Just the scent, thicker than ever, curling into the hallway. Sweet and rotted, like fruit left to bloat in the sun. I didn't step outside. I didn't even touch the doorknob. I backed away slowly and closed every window in the house instead. I wasn't afraid of what was outside. I was afraid of what had already come in. Something had changed overnight. The house felt different. Colder, though the air was still. Quieter, though every creak in the floorboards now sounded deliberate, like footsteps taken just out of view. The mirrors, too, had begun to behave strangely. My reflection didn't always move with me. Sometimes, when I'd turn away too fast, I'd catch it lingering, just a second too long. And that scent, God, that scent, was no longer hiding. It pulsed from the walls, the floorboards, even the ceiling above my bed. Like the house had started to breathe through its very bones. I had to get out. I needed answers. So I drove to the one place that had been here longer than any of us. The Whitlock Family Church. It stood at the edge of town, tucked between thick rows of cypress and an overgrown cemetery that no one had tended in decades. Our family had stopped going after my grandfather passed, but the building was still technically under our name. The townsfolk had whispered for years that it wasn't a church at all. Not really. More like a holding place. A vault. I hadn't been there since I was a child. And yet, as I stepped out of the car, I felt something familiar pull at my gut. A memory trying to surface through thick, stagnant water. The heavy wooden doors creaked open at my touch. Inside, the air was stale and heavy, almost gelatinous in its stillness. Dust floated like ash in beams of sickly yellow light. The pews were coated in a fine layer of mold. No hymnody, no candles, just silence. Until I heard it. A faint shuffling sound, like fabric dragged across stone. It echoed from beneath the altar. I moved slowly, heart thudding, behind the altar, where a statue of Saint Bartholomew once stood. There was now a framed painting. At first glance, it looked religious. Muted colors, robed figures, the usual saintly iconography. But the longer I stared, the more it began to change. The faces weren't saintly at all. Their eyes were black pits, their mouths twisted into impossible smiles. One figure in the background, a pale woman with a slit throat, looked exactly like Clarice. I turned away and found the trapdoor. I don't know how I remembered it being there. Maybe I had been here as a child. Maybe someone had shown me. Or maybe the house, whatever lived inside it, had left something behind in my mind. The latch groaned as I pulled it open. Beneath the church was a stone staircase that led into the earth. Damp, silent, slick with moss. I descended with only my phone light. The passage ended in a small stone chamber, no larger than a bedroom. There were no windows, no doors, just walls, covered in carvings, names, dozens of them, maybe hundreds, all in the same handwriting I had seen in the attic book. M.E.W.J. Whitlock A. Clarice. And then, near the bottom, the newest one, still fresh, still dark, with what looked like ink, but wasn't ink. E. Whitlock. Prepared. My breath caught. I reached out, trembling, and touched the name. The stone was warm. Behind me, Something moved. Not footsteps. Breathing. I turned. The chamber was empty, but my light flickered. And on the opposite wall, I saw it. A mirror, embedded in the stone. It hadn't been there before. In the reflection, I wasn't alone. Someone stood behind me, tall, faceless, draped in a heavy black veil. They didn't move, didn't breathe. But when I turned around, the room was empty. And when I looked back at the mirror, they were closer. I ran, back up the stairs, through the warped pews, out the church door, and into the cold air that stank of autumn rot. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text, no name, just a number I didn't recognize. It remembers you. The house remembers all of us. I didn't go home right away. Instead, I drove to Marlene's place. She opened the door, half asleep, wrapped in a faded bathrobe, her hair in tangles. Emma? Jesus, it's 6 a.m. I need to talk, I said, pushing past her. She sighed, closed the door behind me. Let me guess. The smell? I froze. You've smelled it too? Marlene nodded slowly. Started after I cleaned out Clarice's sewing room. There was a... She paused. Something behind the wardrobe, like a symbol carved into the wall. The scent was coming from there. I thought I was losing my mind. You're not, I said. It's in the family. It's in the walls. I told her everything. About the attic, the vials, the book, the church. When I got to the mirror in the crypt, she went pale. You saw it too, I whispered. She didn't answer. Just reached for a box under her coffee table. Inside were photographs. Old family photos. Some dated, some blurry. All marked with the same symbols I saw in the book. She handed me one. It was a portrait of my mother when she was young, standing beside a woman I didn't recognize. Except I did. She was in the painting at the church, the one with the slit throat. She's not just a symbol, Marlene said quietly. She's real. And she's coming back. Through us. Who is she? Her name was Margaret, Marlene whispered. But the family had another name for her. I stared at her. The rememberer. Something in the house had been waiting. And now that I had opened the attic door, it remembered me too. I didn't know it yet, but the scent wasn't just a sign of what's past. It was the beginning of something trying to wake up. Something tied to blood, to history, to a promise never fulfilled. And the longer I stayed in that house, the clearer the whispers would become. Because some memories were never meant to fade. Some were meant to return. I didn't go home that night. Marlene insisted I sleep on her couch, but sleep was a generous term for what actually happened. I lay awake, eyes fixed on the ceiling fan creaking overhead. The scent still stuck in my nostrils, no matter how many times I washed my face, how many mugs of stale coffee I drank. It was lighter here than in my own home, but it was still present, like a stain I couldn't scrub off my skin. Around 3:12 a.m., I heard whispering from the hallway. Marlene had gone to bed hours earlier. I sat up slowly, afraid to move too quickly, afraid of acknowledging it. The whispering didn't sound like one voice. It sounded like many, tangled and low, like people talking behind a closed door, but there was no door. Just the empty hallway, a shelf of old books, and a nightlight shaped like a ceramic goose. Then I heard my name. Emma. A hush, then again. Emma. I stood, walked toward the hallway barefoot, the floor cool underfoot. No one, but something caught my eye. On the wall, above the bookshelf, there was a scratch, A long one, maybe a foot in length. Not a scuff, not paint peeling. A gash, deep enough to expose the plaster underneath. I leaned closer and saw something beneath the surface. Red. A line of symbols, etched beneath the wallpaper. The same script from the attic book. I stepped back, heart racing. They weren't random. They'd been hidden, covered, and now, revealed. As if the house wanted me to see them. I didn't wake Marlene. I just left. My own house greeted me with silence. And that smell. It was suffocating now. I gagged the moment I stepped inside. The lights flickered as I crossed the threshold, and the temperature dropped instantly, as if I had opened the door to a crypt instead of a home. I pressed a sleeve to my nose and climbed the stairs. The scent was thickest in the hallway outside my bedroom. That's when I noticed the wallpaper. It had started to peel. Not naturally, not from age. It looked ripped, like something behind it had been trying to claw its way out. I grabbed the edge and pulled. It came away too easily, and beneath it was more of the same. Symbols, carved deep into the wood itself, blackened at the edges. The entire hallway was covered in them, end to end. Not just markings, instructions, diagrams, rituals. At the center of it all was a symbol I hadn't seen before. A circle with 5 spokes radiating out from the center, ending in jagged points. It looked like a sun, or an eye. I reached for it. The wall was warm. Then I heard the creak behind me. I turned. Nothing. But the light at the end of the hallway flickered and went out. I was plunged into darkness, and in the silence, I heard it again. That low, layered whispering, closer now. I backed away until I hit my bedroom door and pushed it open. I expected safety, familiarity. What I saw instead made my blood run cold. Every photograph in my room had changed. Faces missing, eyes scratched out, smiles warped into bloody gashes. In one frame, a picture of me and my mother. Only I remained. My mother's silhouette was there, but where her face should have been was just blackness. A smudged void, like someone had erased her entirely. In the center of the room, on my bed, sat something I hadn't seen since I was a child. A small porcelain music box, shaped like a ballerina. I hadn't brought it with me when I moved here. It had been lost years ago during the fire at my grandmother's house. I remembered the charred ruins. I remembered the police saying nothing could be salvaged. And yet here it was, unburned, unbroken. As I approached it, it began to play. Not the song it was made for. Not Claire de Lune, something else. A slow, discordant lullaby that rose and fell in off-key waves. And beneath it, barely audible, was the sound of a child crying. I slammed it shut. The music stopped, but the crying didn't. It echoed through the vents, from underneath the floor. I dropped to my knees, pressed my ear to the wood. Crying, scratching, a faint voice, whispering something over and over. It's not your house. It's not your name. You don't belong here. I bolted from the room and into the basement. I hadn't gone down there in months. The light switch didn't work anymore, so I used my phone. The narrow stairwell curved into darkness. Cold air rose to meet me, carrying with it the scent I now knew intimately. It lived down here. The basement was lined with shelves of old boxes and forgotten junk, but something new had appeared. A trail of dirt leading to the far wall. And the smell? Strongest here. I moved closer and saw it. A patch of concrete, discolored, slightly raised. The shape of a door, long since sealed over. Something pounded once. From the other side, I stumbled back. My light flickered. And then the crying stopped, replaced by a voice. My voice, echoing from behind the wall. Let me out, let me out, let me out. I ran. That night I slept in my car. Engine off, doors locked, music on low to drown the silence. But even there, I wasn't safe. At exactly 2:16 a.m., every car window fogged at once, and across the windshield, a handprint appeared. Small, childlike, on the inside. I didn't scream. I couldn't. I just watched as another handprint formed beside it. Then another. Then 5, each one smeared with what looked like blood trailing downward. On the dashboard, something had been left behind. One of the vials from the attic. It was labeled E. Whitlock accepted. And beneath it, scrawled on a piece of torn wallpaper, were 3 words written in ink that hadn't dried. The walls remember. I'm not safe here. I'm not safe anywhere. But something's happening. Something old. Something buried beneath floorboards, beneath rituals, beneath names I was never meant to know. They marked me the moment I smelled it. This isn't about ghosts. It's about inheritance. And there's no escaping what the blood remembers. Because it's not just my house anymore. It never was.